Now we will begin again after my amazing screw up. So just to introduce ourselves, because again I screwed up so many times the first time. I am Hollowix.
Uh-huh.
I am joined by my friend Pike. This is where you say hello,
I'm the
Pike.
better of the two.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
yes.
Today we are talking about what we both believe to be the best part of Star Trek, DS9. Uh,
Uh,
in probably the shortest way possible, just a few words. What is your experience with DS9? How did you sort of get into it?
well, you basically forced me into it because it was like, well, I want to watch what he's watching at the time, and then from there the rabbit hole dug down as I basically watched it on my own between work I did, and so uh, yeah, the short and simple version of that.
Yeah, and I've loved Star Trek for years. I watched them when I was younger, but I didn't really appreciate them. I kind of like dropped off them for a long time. Uh, Jumped back into them a couple years ago and realized, wow, these are actually a lot better than I kind of remembered as a kid. I didn't appreciate them as much, and I especially did not appreciate DS9 as much. Part of the reason we want to talk about this is we both view DS9 probably above all other Star Trek media, even things like the original series or TNG. So, even though modern Star Trek is really shit, DS9 is something that's like, I mean, you constantly are rewatching DS9. Just put it in the background when you're bored or something like that, because it's just a
Yeah,
show that you could just rewatch. And I mean, even when we were like we were rewatching this episode, we just could not stop talking about it.
yeah,
Yeah. So
it's a great episode
yeah, and
that
it's unlike
the
a
rest
lot of
of
other Star Trek media. A lot of Star Trek media starts off a little bumpy. The initial like first episode, which kind of got lost to time for a while of the original series, was not really well received. A lot of people kind of regard it as like that was a weird misfire. Uh, People generally
yeah.
argue the first two seasons of TNG, while having some of the best episodes, also have a lot of the worst, and doesn't really have a lot of great feel to it. And of course, you and I both have issues with Voyager. I don't think Voyager necessarily starts off poorly, though. I think it starts off fine, but
Yeah,
DS9 starts off on a really strong foot, and it's
yeah.
a two-parter episode known as Emissary, and why don't we just sort of start talking about it? I have a little bit of the video here, so I'm not going to play any of it because me having absolutely no fucking clue how copyright or anything works, especially because I don't have audio. I'm
Yes,
really
that's the
hoping that
Lord.
nothing will get caught. We'll skip ahead as time goes on. But to sort of set the stage, DS9 started around season 6 of TNG, and as a result, there was a brief period where they're both sort of running alongside one another. And
Mhm.
DS9 opens up with this text crawl saying that on stardate 43997, Captain Jean Luc Picard of the Federation ship was kidnapped by the Borg, and this is where we get the Borg invasion of Federation space from TNG. I believe that was in season 3 or 4. I can't
Uh,
recall exactly, but the thing is, this is where the main character or the main captain of DS9 comes in. Benjamin Sisko was at Wolf, I believe Wolf 359. Yeah,
yes.
Wolf 359. He was in a ship that got attacked by the Borg cube. It's led by Locutus of Borg, which again was sort of the Borg name that Picard was given. It was very traumatic for him. And do you want to tell him a little bit why it was traumatic for them, Pike?
Oh boy, imagine getting jacked by AI and become forced to become a servant of it, and you're constantly aware and screaming in the back of your own mind. And then like there being no real like therapy immediately after, like you've like not you, but the thing controlling your body harmed those that even if they're not personally connected to you, they harmed those that you would call brothers and sisters in the line of duty, and you're constantly saddled with the weight of like that guilt even if you're not necessarily responsible for it, like and everyone is kind of aware that even if you weren't responsible for it. Yeah.
So
And
I
then
was actually
immediately
asking you to talk about why it's traumatic for Benjamin, but you actually did bring up you
oh
brought up a much better
Benjamin.
point that I forgot to talk about, which is yeah, it is very traumatic for John Luke. We actually see a little bit of that in this episode, but why is it traumatic for Benjamin? Because that's a little bit of a different reason. That's a little bit of a different
Oh,
situation.
so his ship destroyed, much of his crew killed, and this was still in the time when families were like allowed on Starfleet vessels, like the exploratory ones, which just terrible. Don't ever do that in your science fiction. But in the case of Cisco, his wife and son were on board, and while they were able to rescue, his son, by the time they had found them, his wife had pretty much clearly perished. And so for Cisco, it's sort of like he brought the ship into battle with his family on board, and like his command decision to join this battle cost him his wife, and basically he had to be torn away from her dead body in order to save him, in order for him to be saved by his subordinate who had to knock him out briefly to do it.
Yeah,
That's his
yeah,
last
I'm
moment.
actually really glad. So I have the episode obviously pulled up, and I'm going to be going through it to sort of get visual aids to represent a little bit of what we're talking about. I managed to get right on the little part where he is being grabbed by his one of the other officers. A cool
Yeah, the
little, a
Bolian.
cool alien dude. It's nice when they have just like, hey, this random side character who doesn't really play a role in the series. Yeah, let's just make him an alien because why not? Like, they put in the extra work.
Yeah,
It's something that I think can be appreciated. But yeah, so I'm gonna try and get through this episode, like going through the scenes to sort of match up. It's an hour and a half episode, so it's gonna be kind of hard to find the exact thing on this little timeline. But for the
yeah,
most part, I'm gonna try and keep up with that. Although we might just get so involved in this. Yeah, so Cisco's for introduction to the series is the death of his wife. He saves his son, and from that point on, we learned that he took a large break from sort of the being an officer in Starfleet. He kind of went to the more construction element of it rather than the exploratory part of Starfleet. And
yeah.
we can understand why.
More
Obviously,
R&D.
losing his wife, all he had left was his son, and he doesn't want to separate from his son, so his son's going to go where he's going to go. So he doesn't want to go anywhere dangerous.
Yeah. It does establish something important about Cisco that is later on. Like, so you haven't mentioned yet, but he's a commander at this point,
Yes,
and
that is
it's
something that we can talk
because
about in a little bit. But yeah, he's a commander instead of a captain, which is a little bit away from the norm of Star Trek.
yeah,
So
because he focused on his family.
yeah, and I remember an interesting thing I learned from a sort of behind the scenes commentary is they were originally going to go with someone much younger. That's why he's a command. That's why he was originally written as a commander. However, when Avery Brooks interviewed when he auditioned, he did so well that they just had to have him. But then they kind of came up with this issue of like, well, he's not as young a guy as they were looking for, so we need a justification for why he's not a captain yet. And the reason they gave is, well, he kind of had the family life. He focused more on, raising his son than rising in the ranks. And, I think that's one of those cool things that sort of builds more into this lore of Star Trek where, yeah, like, you can't necessarily rise super high in the ranks without a family. I mean, one of the points that kind of or with a family, one of the points that kind of made with Picard is that he kind of shirked those things. He didn't pursue a lot of romantic relationships. He didn't, have kids because for him it was about being captain in Starfleet. So it's kind of
Right.
cool that they immediately sort of juxtapose Cisco with that. Cisco's more of the family man than he is the officer. And yeah, so he's
You might
pulled a,
say the builder.
yeah, he is sometimes referred to as the builder. And I'm gonna try and get it, but we do get the scene. Oh, good, I got right on it. Where they are in the escape pod, and the Borg ship is destroying the rest of their ship, and we just see Cisco glaring back at the Borg cube. He is very clearly angry that this happened, and this is going to be something that affects him for probably a good chunk of the series, but more so it's like, yeah, we see how this affects him over like the next 3 years, right before he gets his assignment to DS9. And then we get the nice little scene with him and his son fishing, where his son kind of doesn't like the fact that they're going to move on a space station, uh,
Right.
which I always find that very weird because it's revealed that this little fishing spot is actually a holodeck. So they're on the holodeck of a ship as they're pulling into DS9,
Yeah.
and the son is just like, I don't want to live on a space station, Dad. I don't want to live on. Why can't we live on the planet? And I'm sitting here like, as someone who lives in the 21st century, I'd want to live on a space station. That sounds way cooler than living
So
on some lame dirt planet.
so here's the thing. Here's the thing. I think I understand Jake's point of view here because remember what Cisco was doing before this. Like he was working back on Earth on like up in orbit, if I
Hmm.
recall, and
Yeah,
Jake probably lived there. It's a case of like, you know, he wanted to see this new world of like, what is on Bajor and such. Like he wants that excitement.
yeah.
But on the station, you're kind of just stuck with you know, I doubt Jake knew it at the time, but it's an ex-Cardassian station, and
No, he
people
might have
kind of
known that.
talk.
He might have known
Okay, yeah. Well, if he did, then when you think about Kardashian architecture, and this will get into culture like later on, it's oppressive in a way of like you're kind of being washed in like the way it's set up. They dress it up well in the series, but like there are going to be later flashback episodes where the way the station is set up, like it being a Cardassian facility, it is a looming place that you feel the weight upon, like you're being watched by those above you at all times. And Jake doesn't want to live on a station because he's lived there before, and it's now a Cardassian station.
Yeah,
That's going to be
true.
something he doesn't like. Yeah,
Yeah, and I will say we probably should give a little bit of background about the sort of Cardassian Bajor situation, but I will say I'm looking at the script right now, and one of the things that like is sort of Jake's concern. He asks, "Will there be kids there?" And
yeah, I was
so
going to
that might
bring
be
that
another
up.
concern where it's like he's been on stations before. He knows that like yeah, not everyone really brings their kids to space stations, so he was
Yeah,
probably very lonely. And I think the scene shows up him fishing in a pond. I don't know if it's necessarily meant that he's supposed to be alone, but he kind of looks a little lonely. So maybe that's more of his
yeah.
concern. So yeah, like I think it makes a lot of sense. But before we get into
So
any more of the episode, let's talk a little bit about the Cardassian Bajor background. So both of these exist sort of on the edge of Federation space, like
yeah,
pretty much right on the border thing. This series is really much presented as a western with people trying to make like their situation work on what is essentially border towns out in the west where there's not really
Frontier.
direct access. Yeah, the frontier. And with what happened with Cardassia and Bajor is Cardassia was a powerful planet, but I believe the justification was they needed more resources. So what
Right.
they ended up doing is they went to Bajor. It started off relatively friendly from what we're told, but it quickly turned into the Cardassians taking control of Bajor and occupying it for 50 years.
Yeah.
And I believe it was the Khitomer Accords. No, maybe it wasn't the Khitomer Accords. I might have been thinking of that's the Romulan neutral zone. Regardless, it's the Federation has gotten in a conflict with Cardassia. A treaty has been established, and Deep Space Nine is one of the things that they're basically trading as part of this treaty. So it
Yeah.
used to be a Cardassian station, like you said. Now it's owned by the Federation. The Federation is using it as they try and integrate Bajor into the Federation, a process that we're sort of told will probably take a couple years. And Cisco is being signed to man that situation and make it work, build relationships,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah, so to answer the question, we don't have a like like a really unique name for the thing that like the treaty, but it's just called the Federation Cardassian Treaty of 2370. Khitomer Accords are the
Yeah,
two treaties that have been signed with Klingons in the Federation.
yeah. That
But
I
yeah,
remember those now.
so yeah, and like so this is like this treaty was supposed to be like the thing that in like so 3 years prior they had to sign an armistice to like say we're not gonna fight, no more major
Mhm.
engagement. But with warfare, uh general you there's still gonna be these issues that need to be hashed out until the last minute, and that's what this treaty was supposed to be. And one of those like details that needed to be settled was Bajor, which if you've seen TNG, it's an issue that comes up there fairly regularly towards I think the fifth season about
Yeah, and we're
because
gonna get
of
a lot of details on the Bajoran people and the Cardassian people. This series does a lot to
yeah.
really flesh out those groups, and I mean, I would argue are like the Bajorans and the Cardassians more so than maybe the Vulcans have some of the most detailed about their culture, their ways, and their planets. The
Yeah.
Vulcans have some obviously from the original series, and throughout Star Trek as a history. But when it comes to sort of the on-screen presence, Cardassians and Bajorans, maybe Ferengi, probably rank as the most detailed races we kind of get outside of humans. So I think it's like
Um
really interesting
yeah.
what this series does with all those groups.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
that is the scene. Oh, sorry, did you want to say something?
No, no, it's fine. Go
Anyway,
ahead. Go
so
ahead,
that
buddy.
that's the scene. The next scene we sort of have is them arriving. They have this nice father son heart to heart. Obviously the relationship is good. There's no issues between Cisco and Jake. They're you know, very 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 happy father and son duo, even though they're not really in a great situation right now. We then get the cool little intro where it shows the meteor going through the sky. I'm just skipping through the episode, and then we arrive on the station, which has been completely destroyed. And by that, it's just been trashed by the Cardassians before they left it, as sort of a last fuck you to the whole process. And
Mostly peaceful leaving. Yes, mostly
well,
peaceful.
most of this episode, you'll see characters sort of in the background fixing things up, throwing trash away, trying to get this station in working order. We also later learned that Cardassian systems don't really mix well with Federation systems. Really kind of makes you wonder why they don't get a better station later on in the series. But I don't know what the process of making a whole space station is in this universe, so I'm just gonna hand wave that away as like whatever. But so obviously the situation is not great. Cisco doesn't like the fact that he gets here and everything's partially destroyed. Uh, oh, we get our first scene with O'Brien, which is nice.
Most important man in Starfleet.
Most important man in Starfleet. But more importantly,
Yes.
he's obviously a character from TNG. Very minor character. He has a few episodes, but really he's more of a, I guess, secondary, tertiary character where he's just, he's not, he's not a member of the main crew, but he's a member of the main crew in DS9. They brought him over most likely as a justification for saying, "Hey guys, you liked TNG, right? Well, we're gonna bring over some stuff from TNG to make DS9 a little bit more appealing." O'Brien being one of those, people they pulled over, and
Well, don't forget from TNG, there was a specific episode where the Cardassians were first introduced. The
oh yeah,
wounded,
and
and
O'Brien
it gives
definitely has a relationship with Cardassians, and not a
yeah
good one.
because yeah he for some background detail because it's revealed there, and since it's TNG, we won't cover that episode in particular, but you should watch the wounded. It's a great TNG episode. Basically, three Cardassians are placed on the Enterprise because there's a rogue Starfleet captain that O'Brien used to serve under during the Cardassian border wars, basically gone rogue, attacking Cardassian ships, and they're trying to figure it out. And there's some great moments of basically O'Brien talking with one of the lower ranked Cardassians and 10 forward, and basically the Cardassians like trying to make the best of it, and O'Brien's like makes clear like he doesn't hate this Cardassian in particular or necessarily like what Cardassian are. He hates what he had to become during those conflicts, and that reflects on how he acts towards Cardassian. Like it's a self-aware hatred, and like there's going to be moments throughout the series here that O'Brien will have like questions about that, like basically him needing to let go of that as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
Now the wounded cover that a lot, but it's still lingering into this series. Yeah.
yeah. And I find it a little bit interesting. I believe this is because this is the first scene with O'Brien, but he's already wearing the new uniform. So they haven't. I think he's still technically on the Enterprise right at this point, but they gave him the new uniform, which is mostly black, with the shoulders being the color of their department. So,
Yeah.
I just found that interesting. I guess that might have been a scheduling thing, but it's just a little detail to sort of say, hey, look, these are going to be the new uniforms. Which I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the new uniforms. When we get to the Dominion War uniforms, big spoiler, those are my favorite uniforms probably.
Yeah.
Those are a lot more. What they look a lot more practical. These sometimes look just like weird jumpsuits that are almost cheaply made. But
Yeah.
yeah, so there's a fun little scene where Jake is complaining about their room. He doesn't like it. The replicators are all down. Uh, O'Brien offers to send some emergency rations for food, and Cisco's just trying to make the best of a bad situation, and Jake is just trying to go along with it. But more
Yeah, but
importantly,
he's like,
go on.
sorry, it's just one of those things like, oh my God, I understand that feeling of like the military son having to deal with it. Just like, oh yeah, everyone, like, mm,
Yeah,
poor Jake.
but
Anyways, moving on.
just before that, we get what I like to think of as a very humorous scene, especially when you're just reading it in the script. A strange-looking monk appears. He's coming out of some sort of temple that's on the station. I guess the temple was built on the station beforehand. And he just looks to Cisco. He says, "Welcome, Commander. Please enter. The prophets await you." And out of just nowhere, Cisco's just like, "Another time." Like, imagine just like some monk dude comes up to you and be like, "Hey, so I have this religious stuff to tell you," and Cisco's like, "I have no idea what this is." He just walks away.
Yeah. Actually, that is you bring up the shrine, and yeah, it is a little weird that there is one on the station. Like when, later on we see more of the station back in the good old days of the Cardassians. And it's like it just seems weird to me that a shrine was allowed to be there because it's one of those things like the rallying point for the Bajorans,
It
as it's
might
brought up later.
first it might have been something to capitulate. Well, obviously, get more into the whole Cardassian Bajor thing, but it might have been something to sort of capitulate them. Like, hey, we'll give you this, so stop complaining. But it also could have been. It
Yeah.
also could have been. He walks out of what we later know to be the temple. You can tell from the outside of its design. It might not actually be a temple right now. It might just be like
That's
once the station
true.
was abandoned, the monks were like, "Hey, free real estate. Like, we're gonna make this a temple." I guess like if that's
Yeah.
their priority, I mean that's good on them. But that was just Again, this scene is almost really funny. It's like suddenly monk out of nowhere, the prophets await you, and then Cisco's like, "Nah, I'm good," and then walks away.
I'm not. Listen, I'm Federation. I'm not paid to engage with your weirdo like faith. Like
Which
I
ends up
don't
being
know
like a
it.
huge part of both Cisco's character and the series as a whole.
Yeah.
So, but right now it's
Yeah.
very weird, especially with, TNG in some ways was a little bit anti-religion. It was a little, not maybe anti is probably a bit strong, but it was definitely
Uh,
dismissive of religion. There's a few lines from Picard that says like, "Oh, these religious traditions were left behind in the past." Like, yeah,
superstitions.
yeah, there's a lot of lines they say in TNG that are a little bit. Let's be a little careful about that. But this
Come
series
on,
really
Roger. Calm
tackles
down.
religion from an interesting perspective, uh, especially with how important the Bajoran religion is to Bajor and the Bajoran people. Which I've said this before. It's sometimes really funny that everything about Bajor is just the Bajoran people. Bajor, the religion is known as Bajoran. Their language is Bajoran. It's like, okay, guys, like that's fine, I guess. Like it's an alien species. They name all their
Well,
things after Bajor, but it's funny saying it out loud.
it's probably just a case of like the universal translator sort of thing of just like, oh,
Oh,
what
let's
does
not
it
get into
sound like in
universal
English?
translators.
Oh my
That's
God.
another sort
Uh,
of just like funny topic in Star Trek. But yeah,
it's
it's
sort
just
of like
it kind of
this
almost comes
probably
across. It kind of comes across as like what they do with a lot of alien species, which is just, oh, your language is essentially just the name of the species, and the planet is just the name of the species, but slightly different. That's kind of a common thing. But given how much more detail we get on Bajor and the Bajoran people, I feel they could have maybe added a little bit more. But yeah, maybe it is just a
okay.
translator thing.
So I did look it up. Apparently, there is a name for it in English. That's not just the Bajoran religion. It's the Way of the Prophets, which makes sense.
Sounds like a kung fu
Like
movie.
I mean, like given like how they act and how they dress, I would not be surprised. Like and like the certain things that are expressed in the religion, I wouldn't be surprised if like it's like a mix of like Eastern faiths and such.
I got another.
And
I
so
got Cisco has a lot of really great faces. I just skipped over to one. And he's giving a very weird side glance at like
oh
minute
my God,
not
like
9:17. Avery Brooks has a phenomenally expressive face when he wants to be, and
oh yeah.
but like sometimes I'm stopping on some of these, and he's giving a very disappointed glare to the screen right now. Let's just say that. But this is I believe this is him dismissing the monk like another time
Yeah,
perhaps.
I
You
just
know
got to it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely him being like looking briefly to O'Brien off screen and then thinking like, wait, no, O'Brien wouldn't know it. Looking back, like another time. Like
Yeah.
just push it off for now.
But then we get the scene in Cisco's quarters, which is fine. Uh, it's one of those things where you're sort of just establishing this is kind of the bad situation they're in. But then we're
Yeah.
going to get towards ops.
Operations.
Oh, I am going to talk one more scene. Let's see if I can kind of find it. It's a little bit. I don't want to play too much. Get in trouble. I'm skipping around a lot. There's like one scene where Cisco or Jake obviously looks a little bit unhappy with the situation. He's kind of being a little bit of a sourpuss, and like Cisco basically pulls him over into a hug. I don't know. It's nice to see a positive father son relationship. It's one of
Yeah.
those things where like they could have very easily been like, no, they're fighting, so they're not gonna. Jake's not gonna talk to his dad because he doesn't want to be here. It's like no, like
Plus this
yeah, they
Cisco says okay in a funny way.
true
What did Jake think?
true,
Okay.
but it's one of those things where Jake lost a mom, Cisco lost his wife, so now they're all each other have. So they're probably a little bit closer because of that. It's something that is good characterization just immediately in to who like their relationship and how they function.
Mhm.
So it's something that's nice. But then we get to Ops, and Ops looks a little bit different from what we would obviously be used to.
Yeah,
It's
it's not Federation.
yeah, the
It
Cardassian
is.
ship is very much just sharp edges, rough areas. Like the place looks like a weird alien war room, which is kind of what it is.
Well,
And
yeah,
yeah, especially from TNG, because TNG really tried to, everything was carpeted, everything's like the chairs like leaned back a little bit. Part of
it's
TNG's
nice
like,
wood finishes.
yeah, I
Just
mean, TNG's like kind of design was like, yes, space is now this relaxing thing that everyone can kind of do. And DS9 was basically like, yeah, but here's the furthest edges of that. It kind of sucks. Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, so we get the scene in the ops room, and this is where we meet another stable character in the form of Kira. So why don't we talk a little bit about her?
Actually, before we do, they do have some commentary about the design of ops in the episode.
Oh, they do.
That yeah, is I remember this specifically because it's the first thing that informs you about Kardashians in the series in a way,
Hmm.
besides the fact that they wrecked the station. Cisco basically O'Brien points out that the prefect's office is up there. Prefect basically thinks the commander
Yeah,
in this commander of the station, and Cisco looks to it and it's up there, looking over everything in ops. And Cisco says, "So all others have to look up with respect. Kardashian architecture." Uh, and O'Brien says, "Yes, sir." That bear that in mind. Like Kardashians are very much a militarized, formalized, like hierarchical setting
yeah,
and people and culture. This informs everything about them because unlike it like for a lot of Federation, it like a lot of like Starfleet almost feels like still respectful but almost familial, like in how like people treat one another. Like I
yeah.
don't think that's the right word,
No,
but
I get what you
it's
mean.
more
It's this. There's this element of demanding respect, and
right,
your station is supposed to reflect who you are as a person. Um,
right.
but yeah, we're obviously going to get more into that as we talk more about Cardassian. But one other thing, small note, I guess, the station is kept at 32 degrees Celsius because Cardassians like it. They like it warm.
Yeah, that's something that's brought up pretty regularly. If I recall, like a certain character later on mentions like he might assign someone he hates to the Green Home world because it's just cold
Yeah,
and Cardassians hate it.
yeah. I mean, it's
Uh,
again just nice little world building about the species. Is they're more used to a warmer climate than we are. You wouldn't necessarily get that from looking at them, but it's one of those things where yeah, when all these aliens work on the same station, it's like they must all have similar environmental requirements or desires. Because
yeah.
imagine if like you're an incredibly warm species and you're like, oh yeah, I need it to be colder. It's like and you're stationed on the same like
So,
you're stationed on the same deck as like people who like it warmer or something. It's one of those things where by characterizing the Cardassians this way, you show a little bit more about them.
well, it also does fit like how they look because remember they have like the way their skin is. There's like parts that almost look like reptilian scales.
Oh, that's
You know what I
true.
mean?
Yeah. Well, I guess
And they
I would just
always
mean
wear
like you're not gonna if a species like from Star Trek came onto the bridge or something and they were wearing like a
mhm,
big coat, you'd be like, oh, this species clearly likes it warmer and it's not warm enough. It's just, there's small
mhm,
things that they do throughout the series to really quickly sort of say this species likes things this way. With
yeah,
Cardassians, you wouldn't get that unless they told you. It makes sense. Yeah,
yeah.
they're
They
maybe
do
they're
also always wear black, like
that could just
black.
be a military thing though.
That's true,
Like they're
but
very much a utilitarian like group, and they are designed to be space fascists, so they have to be stylish when doing so. But
so we're gonna finally get to the space fascism part, huh?
there's a lot
Or
of
Jack?
space fascism here. But you know what? Cardassia did nothing wrong. Moving on.
Oh my God.
No, no. All right. Anyway, but then we get introduced to Kira, the Bajoran,
Yeah.
and her role basically fills the same role as the commanding officer in the series. She is both the sort of liaison to Bajor with the Federation to help integrate the Federation or Bajor into the Federation, and her past is that she was a freedom fighter for Bajor. So she was a former rebel turned into, the part of the leadership of the new
Yeah.
government of Bajor and the provisional government. And let's just say Kira has a bit of a chip on her shoulder. She's a character who's had to fight her whole life. She sort of views the Federation as just the Cardassian Occupation 2.0. They're like, oh, you send all your people here and all your big ships and all your technology. How are you any different from these people who we just kicked out?
Right.
And she was arguing. One of the first things we saw was her arguing with the bureaucrat. We don't entirely know the full context of the conversation because we basically hear her shouting, and then Cisco and O'Brien go and meet her. And
Yeah.
the second she sees Cisco, she's incredibly aggressive. But Cisco is pretty much the opposite. He is basically just a matter of, nice to meet you. I'm Benjamin Cisco. Like,
I suppose you want the office. Well, I thought I'd say hello first, and then take the office.
yep. I mean, it's
Just
just Cisco is really good at those presenting a demand as a friendly offering. Hey, I need
yeah.
the office out. Uh,
Like, like he keeps his tone very like not subdued but relaxed of just like, listen, we gotta work together. Let's not be crazy here. Be polite. And hey, guess what? That actually take note of that. Everyone who talks to others and has to convince them of things. If you want them to calm down, use a relaxed, calming tone yourself.
No,
Don't.
I'm going to be more aggressive. I'm going to out aggressive
Oh,
aggression them. But of course, Benjamin Sisko is very much in the realm of, well, the Federation's just here to help. Kira is like, I'll bet. And they continue to argue until they get interrupted. But one thing I do kind of want to point out is we later learn, I believe in like 2 scenes or so from now, Sisko plans on transferring. This is not
yeah,
something that he plans on doing, which maybe this is kind of an interesting characterization of him because he very well could have started aggressively with Kira. He understands her position, and were he to keep working here, he needs to have a good working relationship with her.
yeah,
But
and
he
he
doesn't.
did like.
But he doesn't plan on staying here.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. We also find out in 2 scenes from here that he's making the best of it, and like here we see the season that like I he says when I was ordered here, I requested a Bajoran National my first officer. It made sense, and it does because oh, Bajor and the Federation were supposed to be working together. Uh, because bit of spoilers, Bajor is supposed to eventually join the Federation, and part of that of them is going to be integrating them into like how Federation does things. And so even if Benjamin has to leave or chooses to leave, he's gonna do his best to make sure that is like that's well on his path when he goes away.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Uh
I think it's more in the sense that he does plan on transferring, and he very well could have been like, you know what, I just don't want to put up with her, Kira being aggressive. He's gonna dismiss her and not make it worse, obviously, but just not try and make it better. But being a commander in the Federation has standards for its officers, and he meets those standards. He realizes I need to smooth over the situation, so even my replacement doesn't have as hard a time. So I think it's good characterization. I think it's something that sort of shows like it also sort of shows the character's supposed to be very mature. He's not going to take an angry officer personally. She's not mad at him. She's kind of just mad at some situation that he only came halfway through in. So I think it's a nice characterization. Both characters get a lot of characterization. We see him in the when we get to the actual first episode of the series after the 2-episode prologue. We do get it's a bit of a Kira episode. So I'll be honest. I was probably not the biggest fan of Kira, both on the first time I watched and in the second time I watched DS9. But she's definitely grown on me. She's definitely a character I think has some of the strongest characterization and some of the strongest character growth throughout the series. And
yeah.
all of it's well informed, even if it's a little bit brash. It's one of those characters where it's like they're super aggressive when you first meet them. So you're almost your first perspective of them is I don't like this person. They're aggressive towards the Federation. I like the Federation. But we later learn that she's obviously fully justified in a lot of how she feels. But then we get the introduction of Odo, which we just he just gives a quick call. We see somewhat of a funny face on the screen, and then we get what I like to think of as probably, I mean, arguably one of the best 3 characters of the series is Odo, even if his makeup is not yet fully solidified to what he's going to be.
You'll see, people. You will see what we mean by the makeup.
Yeah, but
Oh,
he is the constable of the station. He sort of functions as I remember always
law
finding this a little
enforcement.
bit weird, because the Federation's in charge of the space station. You think they would be in charge of security 100%, but it's kind of a mixed hybrid. It's, Cisco works for the Bajorans. He wears like the Bajoran security outfit, and he sort of
I mean,
manages
Odo
all of.
works for.
Yeah, Odo. Odo wears the sort of Bajoran security outfit. He's sort of in charge of security, and he has Federation officers and other like Bajoran officers on his, under his
Yeah,
control. So I always found that a bit weird that they have that sort of hybrid system. But I guess that might be what they have to do to properly integrate, like sort of like you were bringing up
yeah,
before. And
yeah.
but
It's
Odo's a great character. We learn a little bit more about him, but we notice he looks human with some odd features. And this is where we get introduced to another stealth popular character. We see 2 guys, one character who we don't know, an alien, and another character, a Ferengi, a child Ferengi. Nog is a really cool character, and our first introduction to him is him stealing from a ransacked shop.
yeah, ordering
Odo
around
stop
an
yeah
adult to do it.
yeah,
Like,
but Odo stops them and he's going to arrest them. Cisco shows up, probably a little bit concerned that a child's being arrested. Like, what's going on here? suddenly been thrown into the situation. Kira does some basic introductions, and then we get introduced to the boy, the myth, the Quark. So Quark is Nog's uncle, and Quark immediately comes in and says like, "Oh, you have my nephew. Let him go." Quark also talks about how he used to run the local gambling establishment, but now he's planning on leaving the station. And Sisko immediately is like, "Too bad, your nephew's going in the brig." So
Right.
Nog gets taken and put into the brig. Probably just, I don't know if Sisko plans on actually putting him in prison. We later learn what happens with the situation. But, at least he's putting him in the brig until all this is worked out.
Yeah. And
And
Quark does not look pleased about it.
no, because Kira suggests that Quark is probably the one who sent his nephew and this alien to go loot this store. And one of the things that Sisko immediately follows up with is, it's a Ferengi legal tradition. It's called plea bargaining. So this is where Sisko reveals he doesn't want Quark to leave the station. So that's why he committed to arresting Nog. This is something that we're going to get into in a later scene. But this is something that's very telling about what this series kind of is going to be about. Because already we have essentially a Starfleet commanding officer, effectively the captain of this series, arresting a child to try as a negotiation tactic against a Ferengi. It's very interesting, and I think it's expanded upon well, but it paints Sisko as a little bit more of a pragmatic man who's willing to do probably some more dubious things than a lot of other officers. Yeah. And then we get, I believe, this is probably your favorite scene of the episode, which is where we get well, actually, I got a nice little picture of Nog on there. It looks like a little brat, but all Ferengi kind of look a little bit like brats. And
I know they're adults.
And kind of, even their adults are really short, so they kind of look like brats.
I mean, wow, calling my short people brats. Wow. Okay.
You are pretty short. But we get a great scene because this is where Picard is. So Picard obviously is that dropping off O'Brien, and I believe he was also dropping off Sisko at DS9. So now Picard is basically final debriefing for Sisko about the whole situation. And obviously this is Captain Meet Commander, and I'm just going to read out some of these lines because I think it's pretty good what happens here. I can't really show it, but Picard calls him in, and then it says, Commander, yes, please come in. Welcome to Bajor. And Sisko says, it's been a long time, Captain. Picard's confused. Have we met before? And Sisko's like, yes, sir. We've met before. I was at Saratoga. I was on the Saratoga at Wolf 359. And Picard's face just drops. Yeah. It's I have a little bit of the scene. I can kind of play it where we've the script had a little bit different. No, he says we met in battle. Which obviously this is like the look that Sisko is giving Picard. I actually believed, I was watching this, I didn't think Sisko blinked almost this entire scene. His stare is just so piercing into Picard. He hates Picard. And Picard is both like, one thing is, once you bring up Wolf 359, that is not only the trauma that you brought up. I'm glad you brought that up earlier. That's why I'm glad you brought up the whole trauma that Picard went through. But now Picard kind of realizes, I've hurt this man in some way. And even though he's a superior officer, and I would actually argue Sisko is kind of acting out of line here. He's speaking to a higher ranked officer with no hidden disrespect. All of it's just out on the table. But Picard doesn't say or do anything about it. I think Picard kind of realizes, you know what? This is not a fight I can win. It's not a fight I even want to attempt. And it's such a great scene. It's so hard that I can't just show much more of it. But I actually want to get like Picard's expression. I'm trying to pull it up right now. Yeah, there it is. It's so subtle, and they hang on it just long enough, and he turns away. But Picard is very much just he is going through a lot in this scene, and Benjamin Sisko is probably a little bit aware of it. I remember when I first watched this scene, I really did feel Sisko was kind of being a dick about it, because Sisko lost his wife. It was a very traumatic event for Sisko. I 100% agree, but it has to be common knowledge that Picard was captured by the Borg, and that he was basically mind controlled. He was converted into a Borg. It was very like, I guess it's one of those things that shows, I think Cisco's a lot more passionate than Picard was ever willing to let himself be,
Yeah.
because Cisco gives into his anger when it. I'm sure Cisco has thought, because it's been 3 years, I believe, and that means Cisco's had plenty of time to kind of think over this event and digest the information, and he's still furious at Picard.
Well,
So
yeah.
it's kind of interesting. We actually do get more of that in this episode, but it's really just kind of this. It sort of says a lot about Cisco, and not necessarily in a positive way. I think it's a good thing that you're sort of characterizing what I would argue a very big character flaw in Cisco right now is that he's not letting this go. He is very much he is relishing in his
This is
anger.
something. This is something that is throughout the whole series with Cisco.
Yeah,
If he gets very attached to these moments, and if he's like betrayed or slighted, like you either will get like he's trying to give you every chance to come back, or he's a dog on the hunt and he will tear out your throat about it because he's very passionate in these situations. And like, yeah, like this is a big part of Cisco. When we get to those moments, I'll try to call him out. Like, yep, here's the meeting Picard moment of just like,
yeah. Here's the anger that is definitely in this guy. This guy who's a Federation officer. We kind of expect them to be better, but they're still people. A lot of what DS9 shows is that the the nice veneer of the Federation is in a lot of ways it's very surface level sometimes. These people
yeah,
are officers. They're in a military, even though they don't call it a military. They're on the outskirts of society, pushing
it's in the
boundaries.
military.
Yeah, pushing boundaries, doing things that other people would find crazy. There's a bit of there's these are people, and some of them are very deeply flawed. I don't think Cisco's necessarily deeply flawed. I just think he has certain things that I'm glad that at the start of the series they characterize him with some of these flaws, because that means he has only upwards to go. But I do think it's probably a bit of an inspired choice, because people loved Picard. You're 6 seasons into TNG, people love Picard. To have Cisco kind of go toe to toe with Picard in this episode really could risk disenfranchising people to the character. They
Yeah.
would see this and they'd be like, "Well, I don't like this guy. He's terrible. He's not even a captain, but he's treating my favorite captain, or one of your favorite captains, like crap. Why would I like this guy?" Obviously, because they're going to characterize him only better going forward. But I do have that one scene that you pointed out something about the nature of the body language in the scene, which is just incredible. And it's the scene where Cisco's taking a seat. Picard has already
Yeah.
sat down. Cisco's looking down at him. And as Cisco pulls the chair around, he moves to sit in it. He never breaks eye contact with Picard. He is like, there's this scene where he's just standing over this man. And Cisco's a larger man than Picard. Picard's a little bit,
Yeah.
he's a shorter guy, but you have Cisco, this large guy who's now standing over him, looking down on him. It's intimidating. And I think that was intentional from Cisco's end. And I think, Picard kind of allows it to happen, because again,
Yeah.
this is not a battle he wants to fight because of the trauma he still suffers from it, and also he kind of realizes fighting this, you're not going to convince this person to not act this way. But from this point on, Picard very much becomes, this is not a friendly meeting anymore. This is a business. This is a military business meeting, right? It's like he is like, before he was like, "Oh, have we met before? It's nice to meet you." Now it's like, "Do you understand your position? Do you understand what we expect of you?" And this is also where Cisco basically talks about how he plans on getting a transfer as soon as possible. And let's see here. I want to just read it. Let's see. Uh, the ruling factions united against Cardassia have resumed old conflicts. And let's see. The
I have a son that
Cisco
I'm
brings up
raising alone.
Cisco brings up the fact that he's has a son he's raising alone. Again, bring up the fact that you killed my wife, man. This is not an ideal environment. Picard's a little bit like disappointed. He's like, I'll inform Starfleet that we need to start looking for another officer. And Cisco's like, "Yep, that's probably a good idea." Like, again, the meeting becomes just bare minimum them talking to one another, and then Picard just dismisses him because this meeting clearly did not go well. But so much, two great actors acting against each other right here. I'm actually a little bit disappointed that we don't get more Picard in this series, because I would love to see Cisco and Picard act against each other more often.
Yeah,
I
unfortunately, they had movies to do. They
Yeah,
had
yeah,
movies
that's
to do.
true. That's true. I think you still could have probably made some room in an episode or two. I don't know where if like
Yeah,
I'm not huge into a lot of the secondary material with Star Trek, but I'm sure there's probably some scene where you had Picard, he's on shore leave or he has a mission where he's visiting, you know, the area around DS9 and he stops in for a visit. I think I
yeah.
even
Unfortunately,
yeah.
instead we get Tom Riker,
We do
everyone's favorite
we
Riker.
do get the clone of Riker eventually. But we'll get to those episodes, and we of course later get. This is a bit of a spoiler. Worf eventually joins the series. Improper. I believe in season 4. Is it season 4 or season?
Season 4, yeah, beginning of season 4, The Way of the Warrior,
Yeah.
because that we deal with Klingon drama,
As
and it's like
as
we
some
need connection.
as someone might be able to tell, Pike has a very photographic memory of like everything in DS9.
Not everything. There's
It's
episodes.
kind of incredible, but
No, no, no. Listen, no, no, no. Audience, let me make clear. I just happen to like that episode and a lot of the later stuff a lot. There are episodes where you ask me like, "Hey, what happened here?" I'm like, "I don't care about this episode." But a lot of the series is really good, and I watch it repeatedly. It's not that I just have photographic memory. I've just watched it a lot. Okay, I'm that guy that you knew who lazed on the couch watching Scrubs repeatedly when you were in high school. Uh,
how dare you attack?
there.
Or how dare you attack another one of our mutual friends? But uh, yeah, like Pike has a really good memory of a lot of this stuff. So there are so many times when he will reference something from DS9, and I'll be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And he's just like, "Don't you remember from season 3, episode 4, scene 29?" I'm just like, "Okay, buddy,
and you're
sure."
and you're just like, we didn't grow up together. I keep telling you that. God.
Anyway, we get another phenomenal scene immediately after this. They're really just hammering out these bangers, which is in the security office. We have Odo, Quark, and Cisco. So it's very clear from probably the beginning. Odo does not like Quark. One of the things, Quark says is, "I don't understand. Why do you want me to stay?" Odo's like, "I'm curious myself. This man's a gambler and a thief." Quark's like, "I'm not a thief," and Odo doesn't even just like care. It's like, "You are a thief." All these people are really great actors, but it characterizes these two so well. And this is where Cisco basically, pulls the rug out from under Quark. He says, "I'll let your nephew go if you agree to stay on the station and become its community leader."
We need someone to step forward and say, I'm staying, I'm rebuilding. We need a community leader, and it's going to be you, Quark, and that
Yeah.
funny little face
Oh, I
Cisco
almost got
makes.
it. Let's see. I want to try and get that like little scene because again, this is one of those things where Avery Brooks is such a like expressive actor. You don't expect it because like you look at this guy and like he can pull off a serious face like, but then when he just smiles, it's like, oh god, it's like just as infectious. Like what the hell? This guy is phenomenal at acting in just almost every regard. Let's see. I'm trying.
It's,
There it is. I got it. And I immediately missed it. But then we get the funny Quark laugh. Let's see. He's like, oh, I'm trying. Like,
while you're talking,
yeah, go on.
I did want to bring up something about Odo because you skipped it earlier
Oh, I did.
when we're actually first introduced to Odo. When Nog and his associate are, trying to rob a place. Uh, Odo, like, at one point grabs the guy, shoves him against the wall. Cisco pulls out his phaser, tries to break it up by, firing a warning
Mm-hmm.
shot. And Odo looks at this Federation officer and says, "Who the hell are you?" And Cisco's like, "I'm Benjamin Cisco, the commander of the station." And Odo doesn't miss a beat. He just says, I don't think he says what his title is at the moment, but he just flat out says that I don't allow weapons on the promenade. That includes phaser. He just said that to the new. No, no, no. Kira introduces Cisco like this is our
Yeah.
new Starfleet commander. Odo doesn't give a shit. He is head of security, and his rules will be followed on the station throughout the series. And that's something that should be remembered about Odo.
Yeah,
Like that's like
he's very much he's a bit authoritarian. We do kind of get more of his authoritarian nature, but he's as far as he's concerned, when it comes to matters of security, he is the highest authority. He will fight with characters on this, uh, and he doesn't disrespect the chain of command. I believe there are plenty of times when Cisco will say something and Odo will, begrudgingly do it. But at the
yeah, they're
same,
actually very like after the initial like aggressiveness, Odo and Cisco go very well together because while Odo chafes under the Federation rules at times, Cisco's willing to let him get away with things that say Picard wouldn't let him get away with
yeah,
in terms of like for the safety of the station and of its inhabitants.
Yeah,
Like
and
it,
I do generally believe that like these characters work really well together and they have a lot of respect for one another, and I think they probably develop that respect pretty quickly. One other thing we kind of I sort of forgot to mention is Odo is a changeling. It's introduced like really early on when someone tries to attack him, and his head sort of just liquefies, so he can
yeah,
basically break down into a liquid state. And we're gonna see a scene a little bit later where he can actually reform into like objects. At one point, he reforms into a bag that someone can pick
yep,
up, and it's impossible to tell that this is actually a liquid creature. But that's why his face looks the way it does. Is he's a changeling. There's no other one that we've seen in the galaxy. None that have been seen. Don't
yep.
worry about it. And
Well,
he
we don't
becomes
even know the term yet. We just know
no. I
he's
think I think
Odo.
they might refer to him as shapeshifter, just because he can shapeshift. I mean, like it's almost just a description rather
Yeah,
than any sort of like they know they don't have any idea what species he is, but he's very much a loner because of that, and he's very much
yeah,
a solitary guy, but he's very strict with the rules. It's why he doesn't get along with Quark. It's why he has this sometimes begrudging respect for Cisco. But in this scene, it's pretty good because again, we get the whole part where Benjamin basically threatens Quark. He says, "You're not going to get to leave with your nephew unless you become like the community leader and help rebuild the station because we need to rebuild this station."
yeah.
And
And they have a nice little conversation of the Ferengi who wants to just get the hell out because it is a bad situation, and then the pragmatic officer because basically Pork's like, how can I run what I do under your rules? And it's like,
yeah,
I just I'm just here to administrate. You run honest game, no problem.
yeah, and then
But Pork brings up the real issue
yeah,
of what is happening.
yeah, he says the provisional
Bajor,
government is far too provisional for his taste, and when governments fall, people like him are lined up and shot. So, you know, the Ferengi are very much characterized very one dimensionally in TNG. That is not the case in DS9. DS9 gives these guys a lot of depth, and this is just a guy who is trying to survive and make a profit. You know, you might not like his methods, but he's just trying to do that. And one thing I like about this scene is it shows what Quark's Achilles heel is. At the end of the day, it's about he cares about his family. Nog is his nephew.
yep,
He is going to stay here and risk his own life and business because his nephew would be arrested otherwise.
yeah,
And it's
like
it's one of those things where we see that consistently with Quark, that profit is first, except when family's involved. Even though he would hate to admit it. If you asked him, would you sell your brother for a bar of latinum? He would do it in a heartbeat. He wouldn't even haggle. But when it actually comes down to his brother's safety or his nephew or his mother, he would die for them. And
yeah.
he almost hates that about himself because as far as he's concerned, that is not what a good Ferengi would
He
do.
tries to always cover up him protecting them as just protecting himself of like, his good name, that sort of thing. But it's still generally like a case of he really just wants them to have a good life, and he views that as like being, being Ferengi, the
Yeah,
proper
yeah.
Ferengi.
As far as he's concerned, being the sort of the quintessential Ferengi is the goal, and loving his family enough to not want to risk their lives is something that a Ferengi wouldn't do. But one of the things I really do like about this scene is, once Cisco leaves, Odo just sort of like looks at Quark and says, "You know, at first I didn't think I was gonna like him," because that's really the true way to Odo's heart is to threaten Quark. If you do
And
that, you are good in his
understand.
book.
Yeah, well, it's like he's so effectively like, given what we know of Quark, it's like, yeah, this is exactly how you would deal with Quark. And Odo, like, I think loves that in particular, that he didn't do it through like a threat of force or like just blunt instruments or threatening. He gets how to get Quark to do what he wants already, and Odo loves that.
Well, yeah, I
He
mean, like,
wants to see Quark, who's usually manipulating other people, be forced to dance to the rules of society and such. And it's like Cisco does it perfectly.
yeah, and I mean, I think, the first introduction we had with Quark when he was coming to help his nephew out, he injects himself in a situation where you have Odo, you have Cisco, you have Kira, all present for Nog's arrest, and he steps in when he doesn't have to. I think that tells you everything you need to know about Quark, but it also told Benjamin everything you need to know about Quark. Is this man will risk himself for his family. Like
Yeah.
here's the thing: if you sent your nephew to go rob this store and he gets caught, the best thing to have done is just not involve yourself in the situation. Don't be anywhere nearby. But he did so because he wants to protect his nephew. I think Cisco realized that, and then Cisco used it against him. So Quark's number is made by Cisco pretty early on, and you know it really just establishes the dynamic, one of the better dynamics in the series, which is Quark Odo. But it also establishes how Quark interacts with both these characters, which
Mhm.
that's kind of a lot of what this episode does. I think nearly every character has a pretty decent interaction with Cisco, whether it's
Mhm.
O'Brien, Kira, Quark Odo. We're gonna get another character in a little bit, but yeah. So we're pretty much going to like we make sure that these characters have good interactions with essentially the main character. The captain's usually the main character. He's the commander. He's the captain of the station. So I think we get it's just another great scene. And let's see what scene is after that because we have the security office and then we have the promenade. Ah, another Kira Cisco scene where
Oh boy.
she's throwing stuff into a dumpster. She's trying to help clean up, and Cisco sort of shows up and she's like, "Oh, you Starfleet officers aren't used to getting your hands dirty." Cisco, to immediately shut her up, grabs the nearest piece of trash and throws it in the dumpster and just looks at her like this man
Knowing
is.
the palms of his hand as well. I remember this scene very clearly. I
Yep.
don't have it right now, but I know what he does. It's like
He
just
is he
a
is he
sad
is
little
yeah.
gesture.
He is very much I think there's a degree of he is not really liking her behavior. He hasn't said anything or done anything about it yet, but he is proving her wrong. He is showing her it's like we're not enemies here. And Cisco informs her of the situation with Quark. Again, I like this, right? She has more of an understanding of this station than he does. She has a more understanding of the factors involved, the people involved. So it's in a way, Cisco's almost reporting to her. I've done this. Please be aware of that as a situation. It's good, sort of good military, almost decorum, where the situation has changed. He doesn't need to inform her, but he does because it would help the situation going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think it's probably there might be a degree of he's trying to earn her respect. He's trying to say, you know, I've already handled a pretty tenuous circumstance without you even knowing. I think he is trying to build that relationship, and that means he is trying to treat her with respect. But this kind of just evolves. Kira doesn't want any of it. She still really just does not care for the Federation. And she even says this government will be gone in a week, and so will you. She is fully aware that this is just not going to function. This is not going to work. Which I do kind of wonder
Hmm.
about that. You know, Bajor was occupied for 50 years. Technically, she said the Cardassians first arrived 60 years ago. So I guess it took 10 years for the occupation to properly take effect, which fits other stories
Yeah.
we have of it.
Basically,
But
yeah.
this is the
It takes
first government that they've had in the last 50 years that's come in. I wonder why she's of the opinion that it's just going to fall like all the others. I mean, I don't know if there's a history of this in the galaxy of the Federation trying to establish a government with place and not being successful. It could reflect real life. That
so
happens a lot in real life. But I'm just wondering where
yeah.
Kira's sort of getting that perspective from.
So it's one of those things of it comes up throughout the series. Like there's like divisions and such of like what should be done. But in terms of like real history, like so everyone be aware that I'm a history major and I read a lot about history. So, if if Mr. Hollow ever wants background, like ask me. Generally speaking, like revolution slash overthrowing tyrannical like oppressors is never a clean affair. And a good example in this is if anyone's ever like read up on the Chinese fighting against the Japanese during the Second World War, it even when there was this common enemy of the Japanese, it took a lot of effort on the nationalist side to get Chiang Kai-shek to go long foot rather than continuing to persecute the communists, because it was basically understood that they're still enemies at the end of the day. It's just they have the Japanese. And when that happened, once the Japanese were removed, immediately, like, both sides were trying to pounce on any situation to get leverage over the other one to become the supreme government. I assume similar things are happening here. Not quite as, like, just bloodbath ready, because in the case of Bajor, there wasn't the previous conflict, it seemed like. But now, like 50 years later, this is their first government. they're gonna fight about what this government should be and what its future should be.
Yeah, I
Just
mean,
like,
yeah, because
yeah,
the next line is, when she says you're going to be gone in a week, Cisco asks, "Well, what happens then?" And Kira almost somberly responds, "Civil war."
yeah,
And I think she kind of recognizes there's no there's no good way out of the situation. So I'm not gonna lie,
yeah.
I do kind of think if she thinks Civil War, like let's see, Cisco does say you think it's inevitable, and she responds with the only one who could prevent it is Opaka, who is their spiritual leader, one of their spiritual leaders. And
Mhm.
I find it interesting. It's like she's willing to risk civil war to get rid of the Federation. I think that's not like she's willing to get rid of the Federation even if it risks civil war. I think that's something really interesting about her character, and I think it shows. We later learn Kira, her faith is incredibly important to her. It is something that she constantly reaffirms. It's a characterization trait that sticks with her pretty much to the end. It's challenged, it's resolved, but the fact that she
Mhm.
believes that civil war is inevitable unless her spiritual leader in the form of Opaka can solve it, like that's a lot of faith in one person. But she doesn't seem to really question it. She talks about the nature of how their religion is what unified them while under the Cardassians and how important it is to them, even though it's been somewhat diminished because of the occupation.
Mhm.
So it's at this point that the monk reappears and he says, "Commander, it is time." It's almost funny. It's just the monk's here, guys, to guide Cisco on his quest. But yeah,
Yeah.
so then we get a nice little transition to I think our first look of Bajor. Let's see. Yep, and we got a nice little map painting. Bajor looks really nice. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of
Nice
planets
place.
end up looking like this. They have like almost the same map painting they'll use, but I don't know what I'd call the architecture. I see like large columns and domes. I almost want to say something Roman, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Um, it's uh, I'm trying to tell from the column. It's almost like I would say like Greco-Rome. Yeah, I'm trying to think like, is there something Eastern that could be a good equivalent? Not really, because it's mostly like the dome, the art, like the perfect like arch dome sort of situation, and it's not like we're seeing the equivalent. But they do have that one temple there that I'm like, that's more like Southeast Asia. Like if you're looking at what I'm looking at, where
Yeah, I'm looking now.
so there's like in the forefront there's the two like towers, and then on the right side and a layer behind that there's that one building with columns. But then in a layer behind that on the left, there's like one that's like sticking up like a spire almost deal.
Yeah,
I
I think
I
so.
I'm looking at I'm looking at the grounds there. I'm just thinking like this feels almost like Southeast Asia, like
Well,
like
I'm not gonna lie.
how
I think they use a similar map painting for at some point Cardassian locations, which could influence the Cardassia
uh
has influenced their architecture, which would be a cool little
mm,
detail. But let's be fair. I don't think we actually get a lot in the realm of Bajor having this unique architecture that we delve into. There's a few stuff we see later on, but it's really kind of a little bit
mhm.
more. I feel like we should see more. I'm not gonna lie, but at the same time, there's technology limitations. This show oftentimes did have a shoestring budget when it came to pulling some of this stuff off. We see a good amount. We see enough, but because kind of highlights into this next episode or next scene where they're in this like temple, and it's a very bare bones temple. It's been partially destroyed, admittedly. There's like rubble on the ground, so I guess like
Yeah.
they some Cardassians probably caused some damage, and we meet Kaiopaka, and what I find to be one of the most hilarious fucking like religious traditions you can kind of see, which is the Bajorans will just reach up and touch your ear. That's just something they do.
Have you explored your paw today?
Yeah,
Give me your ear now.
they measure your paw and like your paw is strong. I don't know what this is. The end of the series never explains
The
what the
life
pause.
it
It's like your life force, but it's like, does it mean that Cisco has powers? Who knows? But it's funny that I'm not gonna lie. I'm trying to get to like the exact scene. Oh yeah, without even explaining it, she just reaches up and touches his ear. Like, there's no element of like, oh, may I touch your ear? It's part of our religious, process. And Cisco might say yes because he's like, yeah, this is just dealing with an alien culture. This is something they do. But she's just like, nope, I'm gonna touch your ear now. If someone did that to me, I'd probably
yeah.
just like push them away, like, please don't touch my ear. But
That's my soul. Yeah, it's supposed to be the soul. Like
you also
the
notice this with
like
you know, a lot of Bajorans, they'll wear like the earring. I think they wear it on the opposite ear you measure your paw on.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just an element of, you know, it's I guess it represents like it's the left ear they grab for the you know, to measure your paw. So the right ear always has like an earring. But I also find this very weird because like as she's touching his ear, Cisco seems to really kind of enjoy it. I don't know if it's like relaxing to him or it's just like, this nice old lady's touching
He
my
got a
ear.
little Ferengi in it. He got a little Ferengi in him.
Yeah, I'm sometimes like, okay,
Little
buddy,
Uma.
you have a little bit too comfortable with this person touching your ear, which is actually funny. I had it for a second, but as she like reaches to touch his ear, he does actually flinch a little bit. That could just be the actor doing it,
Yeah.
but it's just an element of. I mean, I guess he's been informed that this is what Bajorans do. It still feels very rude to do that. I feel if an alien
Yeah.
came to your planet and you're just like, here, let me touch your ear, they'd be like, don't.
Oh, is it the moment where like we're like camera wise we're looking at a pocket in the back of his head and she raises it up and his head like jerks a little bit to the right
Yeah,
because it's that's that's a flinch. I'm pretty sure it's like someone unfamiliar with it.
yeah. I mean, like, you know, I remember one thing I learned interesting about the filming of TV shows is how few takes they were kind of allowed to have. You know, you had maybe like 2 or 3 takes of a scene, and that was like if it's an important scene. Otherwise, get it right the first time or else. And
Yeah, like this is a step above soap operas. Instance of like, soap operas, you need a new episode every day of the
yeah,
main of the work week.
I guess it would
It's
also
like,
matter.
oh
I guess it would
god.
also matter how soon into the scene you screw up. If you screw up the immediate section, it's like okay, it's not really that much of a reshoot. But if you're like a few lines in and you have to reshoot, it's like all right, here we go again. But you know, it's you know, it's very interesting. They learn about pause. Let's see, is there any other thing they sort of talk about? Oh yeah, she talks about how your arrival has been greatly anticipated.
Mhm.
So I mean, clearly these monks, you know, Opaka, they have something prepared for Cisco, but he has no idea what it
Yeah.
is.
This is
And
also where we first hear the term the emissary.
which is yeah, the name of the
Uh
episodes. So she says, you know, the one who does not wish to be among us is to be the emissary. She finds that somewhat, you know, interesting or ironic.
Ironic, yeah.
Yeah, but it's I mean, it's one of those things where we later do learn a little bit about, like you mentioned the prophets before, because their religion does worship entities known as the prophets. They're called this way because they have these, you know, as far as the Bajorans know at this point, they encounter these objects, which I like to call Jolly Ranchers, but they call the orbs. Oh yeah, they had this cool, like the water they were sitting next to was a hologram, so they walked down into this little dungeon. I like that. It's a nice little way to hide stuff. Like who would be like, why are you turning the water? Why would you hologram water? It's like so no one knows this is where we keep our sacred Jolly Ranchers. But yeah, they give them
uh
these like weird little. They look more like hourglasses. I don't know why they call them orbs. But she introduces them. She calls it a tear of the prophet. And Cisco looks in it, and we get a flash. And suddenly, Cisco's on a beach. And he's burning his feet. And I almost got that one scene where we see Jennifer, his wife, on the beach.
yeah.
You know, we have Cisco in his crazy purple like beachwear. I think it's.
God,
I think it
future
works.
fashion is so no, future fashion. If it's not the Dominion War outfit, future Federation fashion is just terrible. It's awful. I hate it every time because it's just so bad. Half the
Yeah,
time they look homeless, and this is an exception.
yeah.
Of
The
like,
material looks cheap. That's kind of like what I don't want to get too deep into the fashion, but I will say sometimes the material looks a little cheap. I'll say that mostly about like the
I also
uniforms.
hate I also hate the asymmetry of it because if you look at what he's wearing, there's purple, and the two browns, and then the purple. But depending on what side of his body it's on,
Oh, I
the
see it.
what,
Like the tan stripe.
yeah, yeah, that like light brown or whatever it is,
Oh,
it's like
that is weird.
yeah.
I wonder what someone designed that. I don't know. That's weird. But so for some reason Cisco's in this vision, and one of the things, like he's very confused. He meets Jennifer, and he's like, I know this place. This is Gilgo Beach. It's where we met. And she's like, have we met before? I was carrying these lemonades. The sand was burning my feet. And I stopped here. And then he does the greatest thing ever. I'm going to try and get it. I'm going to try and get it because hold on, let's see. A little bit more. See if I can actually put some audio to this. I don't know if it'll capture the audio, but oh, well, I don't think it's capturing the audio, unfortunately. But he just
You can
screams.
do it pretty good.
He just screams, "Oh!" It's like he's like surprised at all this. Do you realize how incredible this is? Like he's so
And
excited to be talking to his wife again.
I mean, wouldn't you be? Wouldn't you after
Oh
three
no,
years?
of course. But it's almost just like it just hit him, and he had to shout out. This is something I love about Cisco. He is most of the time fairly serious, but he has these moments of just passion that explode from him. Whether it's a crazy smile, or in this case, where he's like, "This is incredible. This is the greatest day of my life." And she's acting as if this is the first time they met because it's like a vision, but she's responding
Yeah,
to him. She's
it's
responding to him as if he's talking. It's a little weird, but the whole point is that I guess the orbs show you something you need to be seen, or an important moment in your.
yeah.
This one shows you an important moment in your life, particularly.
So what it specifically does, because this is the orb of changes, this is the moment where, like, the most important moment when it comes to changing Cisco's life, because this is where he meets the woman he will come to love and start a family with, and eventually lose and be heartbroken about. And like the weight of that within this episode is what he deals with. Like this is like setting up like this is where the emotional trauma is for Cisco.
Yeah,
Like
and one of the things that so clearly once Cisco kind of realizes this whole situation, he just goes to hitting on his wife. Like she's kind of like really confused, and the vision version of her is really confused. She's like, "I don't accept drinks from strange men," and she starts like walking away, and he just follows her. Like she's like, "Did we
yeah,
meet
a little
before?
aggressive.
Did we meet before?" He's like, "No. How do you know my name?" He's like, or George told me at the party." He's like, "Oh, I'm a Starfleet Academy person." He's like, "Oh, my mother warned me against junior officers." Like, "Your mother is gonna adore me," and she's like, "You're awfully sure of yourself." And then he says like one of the best lines. It's not every day you meet the girl you're gonna marry, and she says, "Do you use this routine a lot with women?" He's like, "No, never before, and never again." And I'm just like, God damn, the motherfucking Cisco is just he is such a charmer, even against a vision of his wife. He just cannot help but be as charming as possible. Like
Yeah.
it's a nice little scene. I don't know. It's fun. It's fun seeing Cisco. Like up until this point, he's been largely fairly dour. He's been dealing with a lot of stuff. This is shown. I think other than when he's dealing with his son, this is him being really happy. And he started off confused. He grows to be happy, and then then the orb stops its effect, and he just he screams for her name because he's like, "Oh, that's gone. Why'd you show me this?" Let's see, like what does Kaiopaka say? Because he's back in the temple with Kaiopaka, and she mentions that the Cardassians took some of the orbs. Some of the orbs have been lost forever, and basically she's telling him more about the prophets. The prophets sent these orbs to teach us things we need to know. And if the power of the celestial temple was discovered, it could the Cardassians could use it to destroy them. So it's presenting a lot of the stakes for the series going forward.
Yeah.
I do feel they probably moved a little bit of a more different direction as the series went on, but this is a plot line that pretty much.
This is more just for the first episode. Like you need to find that celestial temple now.
That's true. That's true. They need to find the celestial temple wherever it is, but it also is like this becomes a plot line all the way up until the final episode. The Cardassians' use of the Bajoran religion to cause havoc. So unlike a lot of, it's funny. The first religion to be introduced in this setting actually has magical properties to it. There's some crazy stuff.
It's not magic. It's just
it's alien. It's great, super advanced alien magic.
Yeah, listen. Once you can control things at the quantum level, is it really like science or is it magic?
True, but the Apocrypha says I cannot unite my people until I know the prophets have been warned. You need to find the temple, not for the Bajor, not for the Federation, but for your own pa. It is quite simply like the destiny you have been given. So, you got some interesting stuff there. You got a lot of stuff setting up for Cisco's role, both in these two episodes, but also going forward in the series. So,
wish we did get more of Opaka throughout the series.
Yeah, we get some of her. I don't know. I'm not gonna lie. I'd have to see more of her, rewatch some more of her. I kind of remember her acting being a little bit weird. Like, not necessarily bad, but just kind of like, I think she's given a
She's a
very
weird religious lady.
well. She's very much just like she's very airy in how she speaks. She doesn't speak directly. It's kind of oh, you're having a conversation, but not really. You're almost.
Mm,
I'm gonna have to see more of it, but Kyle Paka, I would not say she's one of the stronger parts of the series. But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I could definitely understand. It'd be interesting to see her have a larger role. Let's see. So, what else do we got? Oh, I mean, we get a nice scene where they're back in Jake's. After he gets the vision, he goes to like visit his son. He puts like a blanket on him because he's sleeping. Uh,
Yeah.
to show that they both love baseball. Jake is like sleeping, wearing a baseball glove. And he was,
Yeah.
oh, Jake wakes up. He's like, I was just thinking how much you look like your mom. I like that. You had this guy who almost reunited with his wife. It's going to affect him. It's not just like the scene ends, so this isn't affecting him anymore. You know,
He's gonna see his boy.
he wants to see his son. He wants to visit him. He wants to. I get a feeling he almost wants to tell him, I met your mom again today. But if he can't show that to his son, it would almost be cruel to say that. Let's see. Oh, Quarks is now been reestablished. So, Cisco got what he want. Quark's gambling and dining and Hollow Suite establishment has been reused. And this is, I believe, the first time in the series where they confirm holodecks are used for private activities.
Do they say?
I don't know if they say it
Well,
specifically here, but I think he does offer some time in the holodeck.
no. I'm looking at the transcript. It's like the main thing that he says is so like Cisco's like, "How's the local sense ale?" And the Quark's like, "You won't like it. I love the Bajorans. Such a deeply spiritual culture, but they make a dreadful ale. Never trust ale from a God-fearing people or a Starfleet commander that has one of your relatives in jail."
True.
Like it that's their
Well,
interaction.
then that's a little bit of
Like
a
it's just
spoiler because, well, let's just say Quark kind of runs a Hollow Suite whorehouse. Also, so many times he
listen,
offers
everyone's known it.
he offers
Didn't
special programs for people. Let's just say,
didn't Lower Decks make a like the joke that we always make about like who has to clean afterwards?
yeah, Lower Decks did make that joke where they like you have to clean out the holodeck, uh, like the I don't know what they call it. Basically, it's like this weird green slime that's like produced because of like I guess they melt all the whatever chemicals they collect and they have to throw it away into this weird juice. And she has to dump it all. But it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, here's the thing: it wouldn't just be, it wouldn't just be people using it for lewd things. It would also be like, oh, if you're doing like a workout routine in the holodeck, you're sweating, the sweat's getting on the ground, but something has to
Oh,
be
don't
done.
worry, Sweat would be built the other way too. Um,
Yes, yeah, okay, I guess that's true. Why don't we move on? Because I believe no, we're not actually halfway through this yet. Damn, this is a long 2 episodes.
well,
But
yeah, like a
yeah,
lot is happening.
yeah, a lot is happening. We get a look at Quarks. It's a nice place. But then we get an introduction to two new characters, Bashir and Dax. So why
Yep.
don't you explain a little bit about Dax while I take a drink of water?
Okay, so Dax, she is what we call a Trill. Now, if you watch TNG, you will be asking, what the hell do you mean, Pike? She doesn't look like a Trill. We saw them last time. There was a change behind the scene. Like, listen, it's a pain to do the forehead thing. Let's make the Trill like distinctive appearance, the dots, like the spots on their body.
Yeah,
Now, if you don't know what a Trill is, they are a species who basically act like not everyone does, but the chosen few who are like the cream of the crop who apply to do it are hosts who are known as symbionts. And Dax in this case, her first name is Jadzia, her last name is Dax. She takes the last name Dax from the symbiont she hosts, which is Dax, the Dax symbiont, which was the symbiont that Cisco's mentor Curzon Dax had previously. And there's a relationship between Curzon and Jadzia that will go into detail later on in the series. But yeah, pretty much throughout the series, the Trill, like Jadzia's thing is like, she has the memories of her past lives through the symbiont that has all the memories of those past hosts and, the identity they have. There will be a question that you'll probably ask of like, well, if you have all these memories and you act differently because of them, are you still the person you were before you had the symbiont? Uh, Answer: you should be. I mean, are you the same person? It's like, you are not, but you're also not just the symbiont. It is complicated, but if you ever get charged with murder from a past life, you should not be executed for it.
yeah. We'll get into more of that later, but the uh the Trill and the symbiotes are something that I think is a big discussion, and I don't really care for it as like a world building element, but Jadzia is an interesting character because of it. She has obviously like 300 years of experience. She I would argue she's kind of the Data of this series. Not with like the obvious like I think Data's one of the better characters from TNG, but Data's like good at almost everything. Combat, understanding scientific things, mathematical things. Data's pretty good at all that, and Jadzia kind of fills that role. She is possibly the
Yeah,
most
and
intelligent person on the ship until later on in the series. But she's very much in the realm of like she has just hundreds of years of experience from a variety of different things. We learn a lot about the
so
Trill in this series. Yeah, what were we saying?
so they're similar in that way, but I would say the Data of the series is more Odo in the sense of
Sure.
like Data's struggle throughout the like TNG is like he wants to learn to be human and such, and like
Yeah.
basically establish his
Yeah.
identity.
I kind of just meant a
But
little bit
and
more in the fact of like the actual
capabilities,
the
yeah.
actual officer role she kind of fulfills. Jadzia does a little bit of everything. You know, there's times when she kind of operates as the actual first officer to Cisco a lot of ways because she's I believe the highest ranking person other than Cisco.
Yeah,
I
because
think technically Kira outranks Jadzia, but because of Kira being kind of more of the Bajoran government and Jadzia being the Federation, Jadzia is really more of a
Jazzy is
second.
the Federation confidant.
Yeah, she's
Jazzy
more or
is
less
the
she's almost the second in command,
yeah.
and she obviously we touched upon the very interesting relationship dynamic these characters have because Curzondex, her predecessor, was Cisco's mentor, and now Jadzia, who is I believe she's a fresh symbiote at this point. I don't think it's been very long since she got the symbiote, and
Um,
I don't know if we're given a time frame, but she seems to like she hasn't met Cisco in this body yet, which there could be a number of reasons for that, but there is an element of she is like she has a pre-established relationship with Cisco, but the character of Jadzia, because there's a separation between Jadzia as a person and all the lives she has. She's meeting Cisco for the first time, and she has her own things to sort of deal with, and Cisco and her basically in a lot of ways they act as equals. And Cisco obviously refers to her affectionately as old man, despite the fact that he's I don't know he's almost like 10, 15 years older than her at this point.
right.
So it's like it's a fun little dynamic. I do think Dax ends up being kind of one of the lesser utilized characters in the series, but I think part of that is we'll get into that as we get to those episodes. But I think Jedzia is a very interesting addition to the series because of her relationship with Cisco and how that's such an odd dynamic. And then we get another fun dynamic in the form of Bashir and Kira. I think when we were rewatching this, we just talked about this scene so much because it's funny.
Yeah, do we want to quickly do the intro of like who Bashir? I love how in my the transcript is like young Middle Eastern male, me remembering future things like he's not Middle Eastern, he's Indian descent.
Well,
But
we
anyway,
know his father at least is Indian, right? Maybe I don't know, but yeah, like
no,
they might
yeah,
not have actually even known what he was supposed to be.
that's true.
They're just like
But
he's distinctively more brown skinned than most people. He's Middle Eastern. It's like all right, well
I think they put it down because Bashir's actor is, I think, North African. I can't remember.
well, I do know he lives in I do know he lived in Britain, and it had one of my favorite. He had there was a he was at like a Comic Con or something, and he gave a funny story, and I guess I'll just say it here because it was funny. But he was hanging out with the actor for O'Brien, and they went to this Irish pub, and he went to get everyone drinks again. So he went up to the counter, and the pub owner apparently said, "We don't serve your kind here." So,
Mhm.
not wanting to cause a situation, he goes back to the table and he says, "Hey guys, I think the bartender is a little bit racist." And they're like, "Wait, why do you say that?" He's like, "Yeah, he says that we don't serve your kind here." And he's like, "No, no, no. He wasn't talking about the fact. He wasn't talking about the fact that you're Middle Eastern. He was talking about the fact that you're British," which is just a great joke. But yeah, so a little bit of a rundown of Bashir. We do end up getting a big changing character later on in the series, but as we're presented it now, he is the second in his class, graduated from Starfleet Medical Academy. He is a fresh from the academy doctor, very bright, obviously, but he's incredibly naive. The whole point that he wants to be out here for is he wants frontier medicine, where the real adventure is. And, our introduction to him is him hitting on Dax, and she kind of entertains it a little bit, but she kind of generally brushes him off. So they have a little bit of a will they, won't they for a few seasons, but it's introduced here in the first episode. And then, as Bashir is talking about, like, this is one of the most remote outposts available. I specifically requested it. This is where heroes are made, right here in the wilderness. And he's saying this to Kira.
He's saying this to Kira in the busted up infirmary, and she's just like, "Really? Did you? This wilderness is my home."
Yeah, so he's basically saying like, "Oh, look at you. Your place is so quaint and primitive." And it's like, this is my home system, you asshole. And it's really interesting because the actor does a very good job at sort of showing how Bashir realized his words were taken. Bashir is not an asshole necessarily. He's just very naive. He doesn't realize what he was saying, how offensive it sounded. And he immediately is curtailed by it. But of course, you have him paired off with Kira, who is very brash, very protective of her culture, very much not a fan of the Federation. And he just says all the wrong things. All of that work that Cisco kind of did to build her respect for maybe the Federation was probably dashed with this scene.
And it's so funny because later on, oh boy, the actor and actress.
Oh yeah, they I mean, it's not really a spoiler for the series. The actor and actress have a kid, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know if they're still married or I don't know if they're married or
they were never.
Oh well. All right. Well, mazel tov for them, I guess. But anyway, so they have a kid together. They have a kid together. It's just funny because
they didn't marry, but they divorced. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, that's unfortunate now. But either way, so it's a fun little first interaction of these characters. A lot of what I'm saying, I realize about these two episodes is it's almost all about the interactions of ongoing characters. There's not really much of a plot right now. It's really just this character's here. Time to introduce them. It's like the first episode of like TNG, right? They immediately have the Farpoint Station problem. So you spend part of the episode introducing everyone, and then they're like, all right, well, we have a mission to do. Whereas like here, they don't really have a mission yet. They just sort of have a few world building things, and hey, we're going to introduce characters and have them, talk with one another. So I find that somewhat interesting. So yeah, that was mostly the scene in the infirmary, and I believe we immediately move. Yeah, so now we have Cisco and Jadzia studying the orb, trying to figure out what they can from it. Jadzia's, again, this is where I was sort of saying Jadzia is kind of the data in some ways, because Cisco's basically like, hey, you're our head science officer. You figure all this out. Maybe she's a little bit more of I guess you could say she's more of a Spock than I guess a Data.
Yeah.
Kind of like, she's wiser beyond her years, incredibly intelligent. She's a strange alien species with strange traits. She's probably kind of more supposed to be reminiscent of Spock than anything else. She's obviously not she's not a Vulcan. She's not like, in fact, Jadzia is shown to be an incredibly passionate person, incredibly she loves expressing herself. So, not in that way, but in the sense of she is the head science officer. She's incredibly intelligent. She's incredibly gifted in a lot of ways, which I think this is the return of the science officer, because we didn't really have one in TNG. We had Crusher as the doctor, but not really a head science officer.
And then her replacement in season 2, and then Crusher again.
Yeah.
Well, she was medical. She was head of medical.
Head of medical. I guess I mean, she probably did a lot of science stuff on the side when they needed it, but other than that, yeah. So Dax gives a look at the she tries to find something in the computer, but she looks at the giant Jolly Rancher. And then she gets a flashback. She gets a flashback to a very defining moment of her life where she and Curzon are laying on a table and they're transferring the gross-looking symbiote from one to another. And this is, I think, because I believe in TNG they show that it's basically a surgery to open you up and put the symbiote in.
Kangaroo pouch.
Yeah, but here they've established that Krill apparently have a weird kangaroo pouch on like the front of their body. They can kind of just slip the thing in. It's a little funny.
It's just. Yeah,
it's like a low tech surgery. We're just gonna slip it in this little skin pouch, and then it's gonna attach to
crawling in and wiggle.
Yeah, but so yes, that's shown to be her. It's a very defining moment of her life. But yeah, there's not really any words of that. Yeah,
just an important question.
No,
if you were a Trill, would you let it do the slither for you for all the juicy memories? Would you?
I don't know if I would. I mean, actually, I guess I would. Like, if I was given the opportunity and I was a good candidate, because they make a point that you need to be a good candidate to sort of maintain your individuality. Because again, they want to add to the person. They don't want to
just
you
be
know, yeah,
consumed by it.
they don't want like these older personalities to consume you. I guess I would, because I don't think we've ever seen a Trill who's unhappy with the fact that they're joined. Because once you're joined, you
Yeah,
can't be unjoined without dying. Like
yeah.
you will die
Uh,
within a couple like days or hours without a symbiote after it's been introduced to you.
the only situation we know of is it's not like being angry, it's more like being uncertain about like if they deserve it. Like, yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't think we ever see a Trill that's unhappy 100%, or at least like they don't view it as a somewhat net positive. So yeah, I guess I would let the little worm live in me, even though I kind of view it as very weird that there's this like subspecies within like the Trill that basically like controls them. That's a different
As
topic.
we've said before, it should be a very conservative society. Like with
Oh
like
yeah, they probably would be, just because you have like 300-year-old people who have like all this knowledge. But that's that's
yeah.
that's that's neither here nor there for now. We're gonna have probably Jedzia episode to talk a lot more about that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But let's see. Then after we get the little, we see. Let me see if I can find the funny kangaroo pouch.
I'm glad I've put it in your mind that they're just Joeys for the kangaroo drill.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. So yeah, we just get that little small scene. I can't really find it. Oh, and then we get a very out of place scene. And I say it's out of place because it is O'Brien on the Enterprise, but again, he's wearing the original TNG uniform again. Not the original one, but the one they were
Yeah.
using in TNG. He's the yellow with the black shoulders. So I think they probably had to film these at different times. We have a nice scene between O'Brien and Picard, where Picard basically like follows him off and says, it was great to have you here, and I found you. Like Picard specifically goes to O'Brien, he's doing what is colloquially known as an Irish exit. He leaves without saying goodbye to anybody, and then he like Picard finds him. He says, I knew you'd be in your favorite transporter room, and Picard wants to see him off. I think it's a really nice little thing. I think it's sort of just showing that Picard is, he's respectful of O'Brien, even though, and I for anyone who might not know, O'Brien's not actually an officer. He's enlisted. So I believe
Yep, he's chief petty officer, I believe his
yeah,
rank.
I think his rank might change at one point in the series, but yeah, I think he's a chief, but he's a pretty high ranking enlisted. But
Yeah.
he is not an officer. At one point we do see like a character who becomes an ensign, and they make a joke that like, oh, I'm in charge of you now. And then people kind of laugh like, oh, no, you're not, kid. Trust me.
Buddy, I'm still chief of operations here.
Yeah.
Sit your ass down.
Yeah, but
Uh,
I mean, I like that Picard gives O'Brien a nice little send off, sending him onto the, saying goodbye, saying like, all right, this is it. I mean, we do see the Enterprise one more time in this episode, but this is sort of like O'Brien's last time we see him on it. It's a nice little send off. It's just, I think they just didn't know where to put this scene, because again, they have O'Brien wearing a different uniform than he was wearing before, so he changed into one and then changed back into this one at some point. And yeah, it's just like, all right, then we're gonna put this episode here. It's like I think they had probably filmed this wrong, but they didn't want to start this episode with this. It's a little funny. It's a little funny.
oh, I found the rank. Senior chief petty officer. He is officially higher ranked than master chief for certain.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. So yeah, we have his little send off. It's a nice thing. Mostly because like, oh, we get some Picard, and
Yeah.
then we have, let's see, the Enterprise leaves, which is a big sort of point here. Without the Enterprise here, the station is now without a ship, and suddenly they're in ops again, and they have a Cardassian warship has appeared on the view screen. So we're kind of finally getting into the plot. It's been about like 30 minutes into the episode. So O'Brien, is saying like, oh, we have Gul Dukat, another fan favorite character. And he's a ongoing character, and he is sort of one of the higher ranking. I don't know the rankings for all. Oh god, I got a very funny.
Goal is the equivalent of a captain, so he would be like a Picard ranker.
Oh god, I got a really funny picture of his face for like the first click on it. It's like, oh god. But yeah, so Gul Dukat is allowed on the station, and this is always kind of interesting because there is a treaty between them. So I suppose Cardassian like warships are allowed to have their Gul's dock. It's just a matter of yeah. I mean, like it's interesting, right? Because these characters are very antagonistic to one another. But Cisco allows Cisco allows Gull to come on here and have a conversation. What were you gonna say about it?
Yeah. So more than likely during the treaty process, like there was like rights of access determined. Like, okay, what is the do we have a procedure in case like one of our ships needs to dock at your port slot, and vice versa. That pretty often comes up in like international law and treaty of just like what sort of right of way do we have like with each other. So yeah, it makes perfect sense of like it'd be maybe a little worrisome that it's Kardashians again, but it makes perfect sense. Like, yeah, there's no reason to deny them. They haven't come in guns blazing, threatening to blow something up if they're not let on. It's just like, oh, we're having a little visit, a little tour around.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the scene between Ducat and Cisco is kind of just phenomenal. One of the things that Ducat says is like, "Oh, excuse my presumption, but this is my office only 2 weeks ago. I'm not used to being on this side of the desk. I'll be honest with you, Commander. I miss this office. I wasn't happy to leave it." And Cisco, just the absolute snark of him, is like, "Drop by anytime you're feeling homesick." Uh, these guys, there's so much talking past one another just because they're like, they understand this is not a friendly circumstance, but they have to act friendly.
So no. So Ducat is like talking past and like double speaking a lot here. This is just me a smart ass.
Well, yeah, I think it's an element of the idea when he says drop by, like by anytime you're feeling homesick. He's almost a challenge. Like, yeah, I get you weren't happy to leave this place. I don't care because like Ducat knows Cisco must be smart, so
Hmm.
Cisco sees this as a threat. Cisco knows that Cisco saw it as a threat, but Cisco just embraces it and doesn't even flinch. I think it's these characters are basically power measuring each other up. Who is this person I'm going to
Hmm.
probably be dealing a lot with in the coming years? And
Hmm.
Cisco, like because again they have this treaty between them. Ducat can't outright say, I'm going to threaten you, but Cisco sees the threat and embraces it. I mean, even the next line is, you're far from the Federation fleet, alone in a remote outpost with poor defense systems. Uh, Cardassian neighbors will be quick to respond to any problems you might have, so feel free to call upon us. Like they're clearly saying like, hey, we know that you're in a shitty situation. We can come at any time. That just again, the lines these two are speaking to each other, it's so great. I think when we ranked these characters, I think we put Ducat at in A rank, right?
Yeah, we had high praise for him because Ducat really is until certain events later on. We will get to them eventually, but he is one of those characters where it's just like, oh man, he's so hateable, but you also love every moment, and he's very human and like just
Yeah, I mean it's
uh
pretty good. One of the next things he says is so what do you think of Kaiopaka? Again, basically just saying we know what you've been doing. Like these characters are just like Ducat is really just trying to press Cisco's buttons, trying to see how he responds to, hey, you realize we're spying on you, right? Like, and Cisco is just like, uh, Cisco doesn't even, oh, let's see, what does he say? I understand you brought back an orb. And Cisco's like, I don't know anything about an orb. And this is kind of when the charade has to die because Cisco doesn't really want to reveal that sort of stuff. He is, like, I would argue that, like, Ducat kind of wins this encounter. It's an element of, he comes in, he lays some threats down. Cisco's just responding the same way with this sort of calm language, doesn't acknowledge the fact that he's being threatened. He's facing Ducat. But the second Ducat's like, we've been spying on you and we know you have the orb. Cisco immediately has to lie and say, we don't have an orb. Like, it's really just an element of Cisco knows that Ducat's gonna know he's lying to him.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's no reason to lie other than the fact that you're really kind of worried what will happen if these people like get that object because that's what his big worry is. So I would argue that like Ducat kind of wins this battle of wits here because he very much is like he kind of gets what he wants. He gets Cisco to flinch, and
Right.
I think it's a great situation, but I do think like to show Ducat as like Ducat's very charming. He's a guy who he doesn't come across as an asshole, but he very much is. Everything he says has a different interpretation, and I think this being his introduction probably is probably one of the better ways you can introduce him is to show him being clever and cunning. In a lot of ways, Ducat's like a dark I would argue Ducat is sort of a dark reflection of Picard. Everything he says is diplomatic and friendly, but the underside of it is I am a captain. I have my job to do, and I'm going to do it.
I will blast you. I
Yeah.
will.
Um.
Give me an
Well,
excuse.
and then we have a scene. That scene ends. The Cardassians are going to be sort of staying on the promenade for a while. They're gonna he's gonna you wouldn't be rejecting hospitality, will you, Commander? Sort of deal. So
Yeah.
let's see. Oh yeah, then Cisco meets with Jadzia again. They're talking about the orb. Really, just a lot of saying, "Oh well, a ship was found in the Norris Belt where this orb was found, and that's where they think the Celestial Temple would be." So they're basically gonna have to go out there and find it. And Cisco's kind of pushing the situation a little bit more because the Cardassians are here. This is a bit of a worry. Let's see.
It's
Hold
a
on.
bad situation.
Let's see. Let's see. At least 5 of the orbs were found in the Norris Belt. Let's see. They also have 23 navigational reports over the years. Then we get an interesting little scene because we're at Quark's. The Cardassians are playing Dabo and they win a lot of money. Kira comes in and she says the establishment is closed. Quark doesn't seem to
Yeah,
like
bangs
this.
like a
Quark
cup
does.
or something.
Quark doesn't seem to like this. O'Brien is there to support Kira, and then Quark is like, I intend to, I apologize, friends, for having to dismiss you when you're on your winning streak. I'll give you a bag to put your winnings in, and they hand over a bag. The Cardassians bring the bag on. They sort of throw about some insults, and then we cut to I'm gonna kind of spoil a bit. That bag is actually Odo. They put it on their ship, and Odo remelts from his bag form to his human form, and so that's how they get someone on their ship. And the whole point they're trying to do is they're trying to get Cisco and Jadzia to the Norris Belt before the Cardassians get there. And so,
well, make sure that they can't follow them and get there. Like,
so
basically,
I believe Odo has to disable something on the ship, but yeah. So Cisco is there's just they're cutting back and forth is like they're trying to get out of they're trying to get off the station in the quiet way possible. They all have runabouts, which are a bit of a new technology here. I think they were introduced in TNG, but it's basically a small ship that can go warp.
Yep.
So this is the until we get the greatest ship in the Federation about season 4. This is the closest they have to actually being able to move.
Season 3.
Uh,
Season 3 is when we get it
okay,
because
it's late in season 3 though, isn't it?
No.
Oh, okay.
Towards the start because end of season 2 we get the Jim Hardar, and then season 3 is okay. We want to go find certain things, and they get the ship, the baby.
But this is why we keep you around to correct me when I make mistakes.
Yep.
So we just have a pretty good few scenes of them trying to get this runabout to the Norris Belt, escaping, trying to get out there without being caught by the Cardassians. The Cardassian, their ship is basically being sabotaged by Odo. Let's see. I'm trying to find where in the script we are, but it's kind of hard. Let's see. Yeah, I got the Davos scene. Yeah, I think the script skips over the Odo thing. That's interesting. I guess there's no dialogue in that, so they would just easily.
Where
no, I found it. I found it. Cardassian 1 and
yeah.
Cardassian 2. All right, yeah. So once they get to the Norris Belt, that's when they start detecting some stuff. They what do they call it? They call it it's like the measurement of when this thing opens.
Like unusually high proton counts or something.
Yeah, it's basically they're detecting a wormhole, and they fly through the wormhole, and it brings them all the way to the Gamma Quadrant, which I believe is like 70,000 light years away. And it's something. It's really high like that. It might be like 60.
Hang on. Yeah, 70,000 light. I found the line. The Gamma Quadrant, 70,000 light years from Bajor. I say we just found our way into a wormhole.
And then it's it's very this wormhole has been here for over 300 years as far as they can tell from their research, which means that this is the only stable wormhole that's ever been found in Federation space.
No. So Cisco actually said that would mean that this has been here for 10,000 years. Because
all right, longer than I said.
Way longer, buddy.
Well, either way, it's an element of this has been here for an incredibly long time. It is something that is like, oh my god, there's a wormhole that's stable that goes to an area of space that we have no experience with. This is the premise of DS9. Is this wormhole redefines like pretty much the entire like quadrant of space they're in.
It is basically the Suez Canal of the setting. Everyone.
Yeah, I mean
Like
it's really just this is some element of this is the greatest discovery that's ever been done, and it's been done right next to Bajor, and it's going to basically put Bajor on the map. It's a huge deal. This is why it would be very bad if the Cardassians got a hold of it.
Yeah.
And something that's interesting is when Jadzia and Dax are inside the wormhole, they start having some like interference, and let's see, they realize they have landed at something inside the wormhole. There's an atmosphere. Jadzia sees this incredibly picturesque world. She's like, "Oh, it's so beautiful. There's like flowers and grass everywhere." Sisko sees a hellscape.
Yeah. Well, not like hell, but just a wasteland. Like,
yeah, well, I think it's described as like limbo. But
yeah,
we later kind of realize this is supposed to reflect their internal self. Jadzia is someone who's.
I think I brought this up to you.
Yeah, you
last
did.
time we did.
Yeah, you brought it up. Like inside, Sisko's this storm. It's a very desolate wasteland. Inside Jadzia, she's this very like calm, relaxed person. She doesn't seem to have any issues right now, which is makes sense given that was a worthy successor for a Trill symbiote. So, yeah, like for some reason, there's an artificial area that exists inside this wormhole that they can both be. The orb appears and immediately vanishes Jadzia back onto DS9.
Yeah. Well, first it scans them, and they're like, "What is it doing?" I guess it's scanning. But now, it's just like
and for some reason, Sisko has been left behind inside this hellscape.
Yeah, it's like it's such a weird situation because you and I have discussed like wormholes. There should not be something like this within a wormhole. A wormhole is basically just folding space, and like there shouldn't be like space within it put anything. But this tunnel's got one, and like then we see another orb apparently, and it just yeets Jadzia out. It's like, oh, this is one of those moments that in like the original series or TNG, if you guys like, oh, this is a very advanced alien species or something. Like,
yeah, this is going to be very hard to explain, so I think we should just bury the lead here. These are the prophets, the gods of the Bajoran religion. This is their celestial temple. They are, as Sisko sort of mentions, that they're mostly just a really advanced alien race, or at least as far as we know, and they're trying to understand what he is. They're asking him all these questions, and they do this like little thing where it's we have this like little yellow filter over everything, and they're appearing as people in his life. So they appear as Jake, and they ask him questions. They appear as Jadzia, and they ask him questions. They appear as Picard, both as captain and as Locutus of Borg. They're all asking him questions, trying to understand what he is. They call him corporeal. They call him linear. But basically, one of the things that Sisko has to try and like talk to them about is we're not a threat to you, because they think he's a threat. And then the thing they get really hung up on is Sisko's using the linear dialogue. Oh, before, after, we were here. And they have no idea of any concept of that because they're not linear beings.
Right.
So what we have is a very complicated explanation for Sisko trying to explain linearity and the value of it. Because eventually, when he does explain what it means to be linear, to exist from one point in time, move to the next point in time, and the past no longer exist other than in memory, they view that as like, why would any species live like that? That is horrible. And so they're so. Hold on, I do want to show the scene because it's when they first ask Sisko about time, and there's just a look on his face where he's just like, "Oh God, I gotta explain to these guys how time works."
That's not what he's prepared for. He is not a Picard. He's not a.
I got a little bit of the scene. Yeah, so it says time, and then you just see him take like a small breath, and he's just like, he's like, how am I gonna do this? How do I explain linearity to non-linear creatures? And he tries.
It reminds me of. You remember? So everyone, just so you're aware, Holix and I met through tabletop games, and he's run pretty much every campaign I've been in for the last few years. That moment for Sisko, like I know how to describe it. How do you explain the Force to a robot? Like, because you had that come, and like the thing that sucks about that moment is like I knew the perfect way to explain it afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like explaining to someone how to breathe, but it's even more so because you're trying to basically explain So things happen and they don't happen. But also, it's interesting because like you could probably explain this in a more complicated way, discussing like the different dimensions. But
Yeah,
you need to also make this palatable for a TV show. So they make it
yeah.
very visually interesting, where it's like different, like it keeps jumping between different people asking him questions, whether it be
Hmm.
one of the prophets being his wife, one of the prophets being his child, one of the prophets being Picard, and they're constantly just asking different questions, and he's explaining it. So it's visually interesting, but it's also they have to explain it in an interesting way. And while this is going on, while Cisco's sort of lost in here, Jadzia reappears on DS9, and the Cardassians have come to attack the station. So there's a lot of
It's
worries. Yeah, it's pretty bad because the Cardassians that were on the station, they left and they went to follow him, and they have vanished in the wormhole.
hmm
So Dukat is lost in the wormhole right now. We don't know where they are. More Cardassians have shown up, and they're basically here to say, yeah, we need that ship back. And unfortunately, as Dukat explained before, the space station is not designed for combat.
Yep.
Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's
Yep.
anything else. Oh, we do get a scene with Kira and Odo. They're, everything's going really fast right now, but there's a scene where I cannot justify taking you into the wormhole. We have no idea what we're dealing with out there. It could be hostile. And Odo says, Major, I was found in the Denoris Belt. It's where I came from. So that's basically him saying, I'm going. You can't tell me no.
Yeah, and it establishes like clearly like that. I know that conversation. He very much like he made clear like no one knows what or where he came from, not even himself. This is a personal matter of like he wants to know where like like this is the running thing with Odo of like basically finding out the truth of who he is, and eventually the uncomfortable truths of that. Just
Yeah, and then we cut back to Cisco talking to all these entities, and again, they're basically saying like, "Oh, you're hostile." And he's like, "No, we're not hostile. We want to seek new forms of life." It's like we've not come to annihilate you. And and Cisco is like, "Look, you can see because they've seen other experiences. They've also seen like the Cardassians, and one of the things they sort of are saying is like, "Oh, you're hostile. You're dangerous. You have these negative things." And he's like, "Look, uh, humans, we're the sum of our experiences. We can't just be proven to be one thing or the other." And they're obviously confused about what experiences are.
yeah,
This is when he sort of deduces, okay, so you have no linear time, which means you exist at like all points in time at totally. So Cisco's getting some pretty good explanations about what existence is, like the nature of linear existence. As you examine it more closely, you'll see that you do not need to fear me. He talks about one of my favorite examples. He uses baseball, the idea that every action changes the current setting of the game, and you have to adapt to that new thing. That's the value of linear experience. He uses he uses the fact of it's a game, because if you already knew the outcome of the game, it wouldn't be enjoyable. So I really do like the fact that it's like, okay, you have this entity that it exists on what I guess we'd have to say is a higher level of existence, uh, and as a result, there's something they can't experience because they live at that higher level of existence. And Cisco explains it.
right.
Yeah, he's like, you'll never be able to play baseball because you would know the outcome before it happened. It wouldn't be enjoyable to you.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, for us,
it
we get to adapt to it on the fly. We get to change how we're responding to it because we don't know what the outcome is.
yeah, it's basically a case of like when you have when you lack limitations, you thus are limited from understanding those limitations and enjoying the positives of them. Like of like because like sure there's uncertainty, but there's like thrill in that uncertainty of not knowing.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah, and then while he's going through this explanation, uh, there's more just complications with the fighting. Dukat ends up going through the wormhole. This is when he actually goes through it. Kira and Odo tell him not to, but he does anyway because he's Dukat. And then we see like a sort of
Utah can't
interesting,
be stopped.
yeah. Well, and then we see an interesting circumstance where like Cisco and one of the prophets, I think in the form of can't think. I think it's in the form of one of the Jennifers. They're looking at another version of like Cisco's memories to try and understand linear experience.
Mhm.
And it's the moment when he was like talking to his wife and asked her to marry her, basically. And part of what he's trying to say is like, these experiences can be positive, they can be negative. Um, and let's see. Then they bring him to that one scene. They bring him to the death of his wife,
Life,
and
yeah, the
they ask him, this is your experience. And he's like, but it's difficult to be here, more difficult than any other memory. They ask why. He's like, because this is the day I lost her. And like, well, then why do you exist here? He doesn't understand. And they're like, you exist here. Because this whole time he's trying to explain the nature of linear existence, that you move past certain experiences, you gain from those experiences, and use that to change what happens going forward. But Cisco, as we established before, is really hung up on his wife's death. Reasonably so, obviously. But
the pain emanates far into the future.
Yeah, but he can't get past it. So when they look at his experiences, he's constantly reliving that one experience. And one of the things they end up saying is, you are here. And Cisco admits that, yeah, I'm here. I can't move past this for some reason. And then they explain, then your existence isn't wholly linear.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting way of interpreting, because it's like the aliens are basically trying to find some common ground. Cisco almost exists. Yeah, Cisco pretty much exists at this one point in time, and everything else is almost like washing over him. I think it's very interesting sort of. I think it's a very interesting sort of like dynamic where because the prophets are trying to understand what linear forms of existence are, but they're also trying to establish, okay, but is this form of existence a threat to us? And as they look at his experiences, they conclude he's not. But they also conclude he's incredibly hung up on this one experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're also basically like, they view it's like, I want to see how they read this. Oh yeah, they comment that more of your kind have entered the wormhole. We're going to destroy them. Our existence is disrupted whenever you enter the passageway, and your linear nature is inherently destructive to us. I don't know entirely what that means, but I think it's mostly the idea that, like, I think they're basically just saying, your people, you're going to act in ways that you don't understand. And as a result, it's a threat to us.
Yeah, because they're, looking, remember, everything to them happens all at once. And they understand, like, that kind of implies that they understand every threat physical existence creates. And even if it's not something like special about, like, these linear physical entities that make them a danger, it's still like they're on guard about it, because it's one of those things like, basically they're processing, even though they say they're not linear, they are processing in the moment this conversation, and like basically in a way, you know how we have to almost like translate thoughts to like understand the moment. Yeah, that's what they're doing.
Yeah,
and that's what they're.
It's hard to obviously convey in a show, but I think they do a pretty okay job at it. Let's be fair, Star Trek has always been a little bit floopy with some sci-fi concepts, but that's fine to a degree, as long as the characters and stories generally work out well. Now, I think they're basically saying, like, by not understanding what's going to happen when you do something, you're a threat to us and everyone else and yourselves. But Cisco basically says, no, we use the experiences we learned to change how we act, because we understand our actions are going to have consequences. And this is when he eventually gets into the baseball metaphor. But one other thing happens that's really kind of fun, and by fun I mean absolutely fucking crazy. They need to somehow defend the wormhole because the Cardassians are on their way. So Ops decides, well, what if we just push the space station right next to the wormhole?
Yeah.
That would I believe they mentioned that let's see how long it would take. Because I think like they were like, because they only had like 4 thrusters or 6 thrusters on the station, and they don't have.
We've got 6 working thrusters to power us, and that's it. 160 million kilometer trip would take 2 months. Kira said, it has to be tomorrow. O'Brien, that's not possible.
Well, it is possible because O'Brien's the greatest ever. He creates something that creates a temporary subspace bubble around the ship, reducing its weight to nothing, so that 6 thrusters is enough to get them there.
Yeah, basically this is the explanation. Could you modify the subspace field output of the deflector generators just enough to create a low-level field around the station? We don't know what that low-level field is, but O'Brien says like it would lower the inertial mass. So basically it's saying like rather than increasing the output of their thrusters, they're reducing the gravitational mass, and thus they can move it easier. The force will do more compared to what it could previously, because the what it's pushing against is not as great.
Well, yeah, saying. And at the same time, that is like the theory of how warp space would work in the Star Trek universe, is by essentially reducing yourself to a negative mass. You can move faster than the speed of light, which is obviously necessary. I don't know if they move faster than the speed of light here, because I don't think they have a warp core, but they create a warp bubble and then they move it somewhat So like they're able to move there fast enough. I don't know if it's necessarily warp, but it's interesting.
Yeah,
It's interesting. Again, it's kind of just technobabble. They get there because they need to get there, and they have a somewhat decent science explanation as to why.
you can nod along and say like, "Yeah, that makes sense." Everyone, be aware, Star Trek technobabble. It is technobabble for a reason. Anyone who says like, "Oh, it's harder sci-fi than Star Wars,"
Yeah, well, I mean, they'll just use subspace to justify anything they want, which they do right here. They're like, just make a subspace bubble. It's like, yeah, got it. It's like, okay, I guess you could do that. But
yeah,
yeah, so I mean, we're getting closer and closer to the end here. Cisco's continuing to explain. This is when he does get to the baseball metaphor. I really do like this metaphor. I know people make fun of it. I do like baseball. It's but the nature of like basically a turn-based game is explaining
yeah.
how this works. And baseball is a really important part of Cisco's character. He loves baseball. He and his son bond over baseball. So to have him be able to use this to explain to the prophets, it's probably why they gave him that, right? They probably used the idea of a sport of like, okay, we'll use a sport to explain linear existence to these creatures. But then
Mhm.
it's like, well, wait, what sport would Cisco use? And like, I'll make him say baseball, and then make big baseball part of his character. I think that's really the cool thing you can kind of do. And like, there's a line here that I really do like. Uh, the game wouldn't be worth playing if we didn't know what was going to happen. So you value your ignorance for what is to come. And Cisco says that might be the most important thing to understand about humans. It's the unknown that defines our existence. We are constantly searching, not just for answers to questions, but for new questions. We are explorers. We explore our lives day by day, and we explore the galaxy, trying to expand the boundaries of knowledge. And that is why I am here, not to conquer you, either with weapons or with ideas, but to coexist and learn. So, I mean, that's really just Star Trek in like distilled down to a concept. Is going where no one's gone before, exploring the unknown. Our mission is to find new species and new forms of life. That's it. That's what Star Trek is, and Cisco basically uses that as the core explanation to these creatures about what it means to be human. Kind of a little racist there, Cisco. Not talking about Vulcans or Andorians or any of the other parts of the Federation, just humans.
Yeah, well, you know what? You know what? It's not like they
No,
keep
I
each
know.
species in each.
He's using humans as the colloquial
Plus,
human.
let's be fair. We know later on he has a reason to not like certain Vulcans. Okay, we
Okay, you
know.
know what? We'll get into the depths of Cisco's character later when it comes to that sort of stuff. But for now, I find it a little funny. What else would you say
Mhm.
other than humans? I guess like you could just say that's what it means. That's the thing you need to understand about linear beings. I don't know. It doesn't hit the same way. Um, and again,
Yeah, it's very specific.
this is when they bring up the whole if that's true, why do you exist here? And Cisco has a really hard time trying to answer that question. Why does he exist at the moment where his wife is dying? And part of it is just he talks about the nature of not being able to overcome that.
Mhm.
Let's see, I'm trying to think like
Yeah,
what else they because again, there's just a lot of technical like there's plot happening where Cardassians are chasing them. Oh, uh, they do basically have to. They are able to scramble, I guess, the readings for their defenses on the station to trick the
yeah,
Cardassians to think their station is far more equipped than it is. I think they trick them to think it's almost like 2,000 proton torpedoes or something, when in reality they had six that they all fired in one shot.
yeah. It was a case of like um, where is it? They give a number, and
Well,
it's
either way,
recalled
like
later on, and
Kira. This is where obviously
basically
Kira
they
really
blow.
shines. Yeah, Kira shines here. In part you could probably cite her guerrilla tactics that she learned when she was part of the rebellion. But her goal is like, okay, we cannot beat these ships. There's three warships. We don't have the means of fighting them. So scramble what our resources are. Fire all six photon torpedoes in a single burst to make it seem like we have plenty. And
Hmm.
O'Brien's like, "Are you sure we want to shoot all six?" It's like we're not gonna beat them with six, even if we didn't. So she's basically like, shoot all six photon torpedoes. It it doesn't do anything to the ship. It looks like it probably weakens its shields. Uh, but
Yeah.
it's enough to basically like scare them off because once they find they have 2,000 of these, that throwing those six wasn't a bluff. When in reality, it was a bluff. So I
Well,
do think Kira really shines in this. She sort of shows her ability to take risks, but also pay those risks off.
well, there's also a really nice line where Jasad, the goal she's dealing with, is like he's like defend it. You can't. Your station could not defend itself against one Cardassian warship. And Kira's like, you're probably right. And if you were dealing with a Starfleet officer, they'd probably admit we have a hopeless cause here. But I'm just a majority.
Yeah.
who's been fighting a hopeless cause against the Cardassians all her life. So if you want a war, I'll give you one. It's a great line because it just shows like yeah, like Kira like is playing on the fact of these Cardassians know that if it's hopeless, she'll just fight them and go like
Yeah, I
even if
mean,
it damns them all.
she's
Like it's
showing that
great.
she has a little bit of madness in her. She's a little bit uh she almost is like, look, I don't care about winning. I just want to hurt you because I hate you people. And like, I think it's a pretty interesting sort of way to show off that. And the Bajorans did manage to push the Cardassians off their planet on their own. It took a long time, but they eventually just made it not financially viable to have the occupation anymore. So, there's probably still a lot of bad blood through the Cardassian Empire about like we technically got beat by a bunch of Bajorans. So, to
Yeah.
have a Bajoran basically say, "I will fight you tooth and nail," it's kind of probably bringing up some of that like, oh, do I really want to lose a battle to a Bajoran when I very well could?
I really
Because
want to.
especially in the
Yeah.
Cardassian military, if he lost a battle, he probably have to sleep with one eye open for the rest of his life. They're not exactly favorable on people who fail publicly. So, I think she intimidates him in a very good way. I think he's intimidated. And yeah, once they also sort of have all this technology that basically says, oh gosh, we scrambled what they have, and now they think we have 20 or 2,000 photon torpedoes. They basically just hold off for a little while. They don't leave. They basically just hover
Yeah.
around. Let's see. Oh yeah. Emergent Saad's like super confused about where they got these armaments, and like they're basically like holding off, like, oh well, we can wait until the Fourth Order arrives. But then Jassad's like, yeah, but Starfleet will be here soon. Like they're on a timetable, and it's either
Yeah.
it's either we do something now or we don't get to do anything at all. And they're like, Jassad the Cardassian is pressed, and Kira and the rest of the Federation on the station, they're all pressed for this. It's a pretty tense situation. Meanwhile, Cisco's just having a weird conversation with some aliens. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Having a nice little chat.
yeah, they get shot a few times, and people get hurt. This is where Bashir kind of shines. He jumps in and starts to heal people. I believe at the end of this, there's no casualties.
Which,
I mean, that's unlikely. Let's be fair, but I think it might be sort of meant to show how good of a Doctor Bashir is.
yeah.
The nature of like,
Actually, there's a nice little moment of that where Bashir, for all his bluster and such, when it does come down, he gets Odo to come over to him and like put your hand on this, hold it in place. And Odo's like, shouldn't you if you do that, you will die. Hold your hand
or if you
in
don't
place.
do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like Odo's probably someone who's very uncomfortable being around a lot of people. He's not used to really being the helper, but Bashir basically pushes him to do it, and he's not going to not do it because he's not a bad guy, but he's kind of uncomfortable, but he does it anyway. We also get a funny scene where the station's being shot at by the Cardassians, and O'Brien's just like, bloody Cardassians, I just fixed this damn thing. Like,
Just
this
fixed it.
is this do you think this is considered the first instance of O'Brien must suffer?
No, O'Brien must suffer. So, for what I quantify as an O'Brien must suffer moment is when it's a whole episode where O'Brien's just they're like, listen, this is the everyman. We gotta milk that and have him have a fucking day, like a
Well,
whole episode of it.
that's on the recording now. You
Like
talking about milking the everyman, but yeah, I mean,
yeah,
O'Brien is a character who he is constantly thrown in dangerous situations, constantly in like kind of absurd psychological torture situations. There's a lot of crap that hits him. I just find it funny because like he fixes at the station and immediately gets destroyed. I don't think there's ever an episode where O'Brien's not having to fix something on the station. There's always there's always something where he just I gotta fix the replicators, or oh, I gotta fix something else. I think there was like one episode where like I can't recall, where he basically had to like leave the station for a while and things just started falling apart because no one but him could keep it running.
Yeah, like he actually brings up at later point like, listen, I actually love like sure it's hectic and some days are tough, but I actually love this far more because he says like on the Enterprise, some days I would just be standing in the transport bay wishing something would break so I could do something because he is an engineer who wants to work and do like
It's
what
almost
he
weird to
needs.
say it's almost weird to almost say he's an engineer. He's kind of just more of a, I mean, he's an engineer. He is, But I guess he almost feels like he's more of a repair guy. That's kind of almost how he views himself. He's like, I'm the guy who just got to repair things. He's not designing things. He's not, building ships. I just want to repair things when they break. Again, very simple, really straightforward guy, but this is just a funny situation. Something else that happened, we did kind of forget to mention, now that the space station is right next to the wormhole, they're basically saying like, oh, don't attack us. The ship you're looking for is in the wormhole, but the wormhole's closed. The prophets have closed the wormhole, so no one can detect it or find it.
Right.
However,
which is
after what must have been a long time talking to these guys, the wormhole suddenly opens, and out comes the runabout piloted by Cisco, hauling the Cardassian ship out of the wormhole. Kira gets her line, "There's your wormhole," and Cisco basically says like, "I have a ship for you." Let's see, what does he say? Sorry to be late. Our friend Gold Ducat had some problems on the other side of the wormhole. I see you've had a few of your own. Like, he's just here. He's just chilling, being who he is. And there was 13 injured and no fatalities. So, I think that's probably there to show Bashir did a pretty good job when push came to shove. Because Bashir doesn't get too much this episode. He was kind of there. He's kind of shown to be a little bit naive, and then he's kind of more or less in the background. But I'm glad they sort of gave him like people are injured and he had to save them, and he did what he needed to do, and he did it well. I do like that. But that more or less concludes the first big conflict. We do have two more important scenes. Cisco meets with Picard again.
Yep.
And this time, Cisco is a lot more amicable to, what's happening. He's overcome. I don't know if I would say he's overcome the death of his wife, but he's learned to start moving past it to, because the prophets basically point out, your life isn't linear while you're stuck here, and Cisco accepts that. And I guess this would be like the point when he starts moving on from in his life, And the first step he's doing that, he's talking to Picard and he says, "I don't want you to transfer me. I want to be here." Says Picard's just like, you're finding this wormhole's put Bajor on the map. We'll be soon this will be a leading center of commerce and scientific discovery. And Picard's like, "Oh, by the way, I haven't had time to communicate your command, your wish to transfer to command." And Cisco's like, "I'd prefer if you ignored it." But Cisco's a lot more friendly here, which, it's nice.
Yeah.
I think this is the resolve of like, he has grown as a person. He's moving past the death of his wife, which also in some ways means that he's moving past his anger towards Picard. They have a nice handshake. Cisco's now in his DS9 uniform of black with red shoulders, and he is committed to staying here. And then they show the promenade, and they show all the characters walking around and talking and doing new things. So you have Bashir walking around saying, "Oh, is there a place I can practice phasers around here?" Quark's complaining about new rules. Kira's, criticizing Quark because she does not like him. And Quark is there's a scene where Kira's like, "If you don't take your hand off my hip, I'm gonna raise this glass. I'm gonna raise a glass with it again, or you'll never be able to raise a glass with it again.
Never raise a glass with it again."
And Quark's just like, "Oh, I love a woman in uniform," because Quark really likes Kira.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, he likes any woman who's half decent looking. Like,
true. He's a ladies' man, but
he does have a thing for women who could break him over their knees. Like, let's be honest.
Okay, well, let's not go too deep into his character yet, because he does have a thing for women who can kick his ass, but he's also like a Ferengi. I'm pretty sure like most species can kick their ass. They're not really known for their combat capabilities.
Hey, they do have like a story of like of time where like a group of Ferengi, even though they all died, stood bravely against like 150 Lesepians. Like, there is some bravery in Ferengi, but
I'm trying to look up what a Lesepian is, because I'm like, are these just like tiny little gremlin creatures?
I can't remember, man.
I can't find it.
Way later.
I probably looked it up wrong, but yeah. So that is the first 2 episodes of DS9. Really, just a sticking the landing with these episodes, like really cementing DS9 as a unique series telling of a situation that's a lot more morally gray. The original series and TNG were sort of all about the brighter future, and the Federation was more or less the good guys. Going from episode to episode, but DS9 really shows on the frontier things are not always so easy as good and evil. You have good guys who do somewhat dubious things, like Cisco with Nog, arresting him to get Quark to stay. And you have very charismatic villains. You have freedom fighters who have probably killed a lot of people, and we're going to learn about all the people Kira has probably killed. But now she's part of this new government and what that means. You have a mysterious religion that we're going to learn more about. You have plenty of new characters. And, we didn't really mention it before, but DS9 is really the first Star Trek series to really delve into deep continuity in the sense of episodes carry over, character relationships, dynamics. There's a point in time when one character gets betrays another character, and that second character, they just never forgive them. Like, going multiple seasons later, they are still more hostile to them than normal because this series maintains that sort of continuity.
Yeah.
TNG mostly had like maybe 2 or 3 parters that had that level of like, oh yeah, we're really following some sort of continuity here. But when it came to other episodes, you'd sort of skip around and be like, well, do you remember how we all died last week? It's like, nope, no, we don't. And then you just move on. So in DS9, that's really
Yeah.
not the case. DS9 really follows through with a lot of these things that are just starting to peak out. Kira's arc more or less starts the next episode, although we see a little bit of it here, and we follow her arc until probably the end of the series.
Yeah.
I mean, DS9
Yeah.
is just honestly phenomenal, and ideally, we're going to be able to go through everything. I hope I really don't screw up this first recording. It'd be really funny if I did, wouldn't it?
Oh my god, if you did, I'd kill you. I would strangle you.